Hey there. Imagine being reborn with only one useless spell, water magic. No fire, no lightning, nothing flashy. Just water. But in the slums, where a 5-year-old girl is fighting to survive, even a single drop can change everything. Watch how she turns the weakest magic and her modern knowledge into a power that shakes an entire world. Her rise begins now. A girl named Frim opens her eyes wide. She's lying on her back, right on the ground. Frim sits up and looks around. The alleyway she is in leads to a busy street. Frim doesn't understand where she is. Suddenly, someone calls her name. She sees a boy in front of her who asks if she is alive. Frim, in turn, calls him Pakis. And then she quickly covers her mouth. Frim has no idea where she knows that name from. At the same time, she somehow knows that the boy is in charge here. Frim asks what happened. Pakis is surprised that the girl has finally learned to speak. He reminds her that he didn't give Aniki any money, for which Aniki beat him up. Frim looks at him blankly. The boy hesitates and admits that she also got beaten up badly. The girl knows nothing about these events, but she remembers what happened earlier. Frim is absolutely certain that she was Japanese. She led a very ordinary life and worked as a researcher. Nothing special ever happened to her, and every day was like the one before. One day, Frim went into a store after work. She wanted to buy a box of chocolates for a business client. The girl was already going down the escalator. Suddenly, something caught her attention. Looking back, she saw a child falling. Without a moment's hesitation, Frim instinctively spread her arms. She managed to catch the child, but she herself fell. The girl hit her head hard. Now Frim thinks she is dead. It would seem that her memories should have disappeared, but she remembers everything. Pakis awkwardly scratches the back of his head, saying that Aniki clearly did not spare his fists while beating the girl. Everything the girl knew before is mixed with the memories of her body, Frim. She knows that the boy's name is Pakis. He tells her it's time to go to work, and the girl obediently gets to her feet. She remembers that this area is controlled by the mafia, and specifically, Dogger is in charge here. The previous owner of Frim's body found Pakis somewhere. However, the boy is not to be trusted. He is a bad person. Frim and Pakis work together. They sell water. The boy calls out to people, offering them fresh water, created by magic, and possessing beneficial health properties. Buyers are indeed gathering. Some praise the drink, noting its unusual taste, while others find the water to be quite ordinary. Some ask for more. The source is Frim, possessing the magic of water. She fills more and more vessels without pause. That is its job. Although Pakis has no sense of proportion. He sells water at triple the price, but makes the girl fill a much larger volume. The guy pays her, of course, but less than he should. For her labor, Frim receives only stale bread, soup, and 2 coins. Although the girl does not know how the money is distributed, she knows one thing for sure. Most of it clearly does not go to her. The earnings definitely go to someone else. Frim sighs, noting the cruelty and injustice of this world. The girl sits on the street in the pouring rain. She wants to say something, but Pakis reminds her of himself, and Frim falls silent. The girl looks sadly at the downpour, and silently wishes she could at least find a roof over her head. She curls up into a ball, right on the wet ground, and prepares to sleep. Frim does not understand whether what is happening is a dream or reality. In any case, she has to fight for her life. She always wakes up shivering from the cold, never gets enough to eat, and the food she does get is always terrible. On top of that, she has to work herself to exhaustion. The level of civilization in this world is very low, and it's better not to even mention the state of the toilets. As far as Frim knows, her parents abandoned her, leaving her homeless and orphaned. Now, she has to live in an antisocial group. The girl has heard that magic is not uncommon in this world and is widespread. However, they say that Frim is almost the only one who can create delicious water. She herself is surprised at how easily she can conjure up liquid. It seems that this ability is highly valued, and that is why Pakis forces the girl to work and uses her for his own purposes. Frim creates a large drop of water above her hands and plays with it. Suddenly, a fist hits her in the face. The girl falls to her knees and obediently agrees with Pakis, who hit her and demands that she stop fooling around. The local boss likes the water that Frim makes. He even gives the girl some pocket money as a reward. However, Pakis's people take it away from her. Everything in this place is rotten to the core. While Pakis beckons customers, Frim sits behind a pair of tall vessels and calls for water. A fountain gushes from her palms. The girl really enjoys this activity. It is her only joy. Pakis, unnoticed by Frim, pulls her arm. He roughly pulls the girl by her hair. She is in pain, but the boy demands that she work faster. A dark-haired guy who witnessed this scene calls out to Pakis and remarks that the boy has gone too far. Pakis just glares at him. Later, Frim finds the body of the guy who stood up for her in an alley. such as the fate of all those who decide to defy Pakis. That alone is enough to make her sick of this life. The girl knows that things cannot go on like this. She needs to run away. Frim decides to try something. The next time Pakis orders her to hurry up, she doesn't respond. The boy turns around and finds the girl lying on the ground. Approaching her, Pakis crouches down and asks what happened and if Frim can walk. The girl weakly complains of stomach pain and explains that she is very hungry. The boy asks if Frim has eaten her portion. She notes that she is growing and needs to eat more. Pakis replies that he understands. And suddenly he hits the girl hard. He yells angrily that Frim should not try to deceive him again. The boy continues to kick the girl, ordering her to do as he says, because he will also have to pay soon. Finally, Pakis stops, breathing heavily. He asks how long Frim plans to be lazy. She gets to her feet, covering her face. Even though her tiny act of protest has failed, the girl has a plan. Several days have passed since the girl woke up in Frim's body. Today, she and Pakis are going to make water for the boss himself. Dogger, the leader of the organization, has already been poisoned once, so the rules for entry are very strict. Frim knows she can't miss this opportunity. At the door, the companions are met by a guy who lets them in. Dogger is sitting in a chair with his feet up on a servant. Recognizing Frim, he says that the water she brought last time was very tasty. She is afraid of her boss, but she reassures herself with the thought that she'll just do her job quickly and leave this place. She thanks Dogger for the praise while another worker drags the servant away. The boss points to a cup and asks Frim to fill it. She hesitates because she sees how dirty and slimy the mug is. After hesitating, the girl timidly asks for clarification. Can I pour water into an unwashed cup? Dogger gets up from his chair. He looms menacingly over the frightened Frim. He reaches out his hand, and the girl squints, preparing for pain. However, the boss picks up the mug and throws it at the servant. In an icy voice, Dogger reminds him that he asked him to wash the cup. The servant nervously asks again. The answer is a strong blow to the jaw. Frim, her hands pressed fearfully to her chest, watches the punishment and listens to the insults Dogger showers on his servant. Finally, the boss orders the worker to clean up immediately, and he rushes to comply. To Frim's horror, she realizes that she is alone with Dogger. He thanks the girl for her attentiveness as he wipes the cup. Frim thinks he shouldn't be doing this himself. Stammering, the girl says, she is very sorry. She is so nervous that her tongue won't obey her. Glancing at her, the boss asks what she is apologizing for. Frim kneels and confesses that she was unable to use the money Dogger gave her. He asks what happened to it. The girl replies that the local boy stole it. Dogger looks at the bruise on Frim's cheek and her scraped knees. He says he understands her. He asks the girl to pour him some water and then come to him. Dogger points Frim to a plate of food and allows her to eat. The girl happily agrees. The boss watches her thoughtfully, propping his cheek with his fist. Since then, Dogger has been calling Frim more often. In addition, the amount of bullying and beatings from Pakis and the other boys has noticeably decreased. When the girl finished, the boss invited her to eat, and she thanked him. Although Dogger still seemed very scared of Frim, her life had improved a little. When she finished with the boss, Pakis watched closely to see how the girl handled the sales. Frim manages to eavesdrop on conversations while she refills water in hotels. From a maid, for example, she learned about a medicinal plant. In this world, by gathering information bit by bit, the girl increases her own value. Once, while Frim is summoning water, Dogger is counting money. The girl watches closely as her boss twirls a coin between his fingers. If she wants to escape, she has to take a risk, no matter how scary it is. Frim hesitates and asks if she can help count the money. He raises his eyebrows in surprise and asks if she even knows how to count. His subordinates are sure that the child is not up to the task, so they advise the girl to stop with the water and fail. Dogger rudely shuts them up. He suggests that Frim give it a try. The boss is the only one in the organization who can count, and he is always very cautious. So if he entrusts the girl with such an important task, it will be telling. Frim freezes in confusion. The pile contains coins of various types, and the girl knows almost nothing about the country she is in. Dogger wonders if she can handle it. Frim stammers and replies that he has gone too far, and she was going to try something on his side. He just advises her not to overdo it and slumps bored in his chair. The girl decides that money is not the most important thing right now. It is more important to prove herself useful to her boss. She sorts the coins under Dogger's watchful gaze. In her past life, the girl studied economics, so she knows her way around money. Even if her knowledge is no longer relevant, she can still understand something. Frim spins the coin, examining it carefully. The girl says she is done. Dogger looks at the table doubtfully and asks what principle Frim used to sort the money. Frim explains that she divided coins of the same type into clean, normal, and dirty, and then divided them into groups of 10. She adds that this will make it easier to count later. The girl notes that she cannot finish everything at once, but hopes that she has been able to be useful to her boss. Dogger starts to speak, but is interrupted by his subordinate, who reports that the child has been useful after all. The boss replies that Kedo shouldn't interrupt people unless he wants to end up unconscious. The subordinate agrees. Dogger asks where Frim learned this method. The girl, nervously twisting the hem of her dress, says she saw a child working in a grocery store doing it. The boss smiles. He announces that from now on, Frim will be helping him. The girl rejoices silently, but asks aloud what she should tell Pakis. Dogger replies that the guy is already at rock bottom, so he'll figure out himself. Frim is glad that she is one step ahead. She is distracted from her thoughts when she notices the boss licking his fingers. The girl calls out to him. She advises him to give up this habit because he's just been handling money, and some of the metals used to make coins can be poisonous. If too much of these substances get into the body, it can cause poisoning. Dogger nervously asks again. Then, after a pause, he reports. He announces that from this day forward, Frim will work for him. She instantly agrees. Of course, she doesn't know if it's a good or bad choice, but it's better than working for Pakis. Soon Frim is already admiring her own room, jumping on the bed. Of course, the bedroom is small, but it's hers. The girl now has clothes, and she won't have to get wet in the rain anymore. Frim sits at the table opposite Dogger. He asks how much she earned for the day. The girl replies gloomily that she was paid 2 copper coins. The boss remarks thoughtfully that the reports indicated a larger amount. Frim believes that the rest went into the pockets of other people. Dogger apologizes for the behavior of his subordinates. The girl asks how she should sell the water now. The boss tells her to stay close to him, and the liquid will be transported directly from here. Frim agrees happily. She is glad that Dogger wants her to stay with him. After all, this way she will become indispensable to him. The girl enthusiastically asks if she can clean up. He replies that she can do whatever she wants. Frim thanks him and jumps up from her seat. The dirt has been bothering her for a long time. The dirty toilet, the small staircase outside, which becomes slippery and dangerous when it rains. Frim wants to take care of everything. To do this, she turns on the water at high pressure. The flow is so strong that it throws the girl to the side, and she crashes into the wall with her back. Frim realizes that it was scary, but if she tries harder, she will be able to do everything better. Dogger enters the room where his subordinates are, wondering where the girl has gone. He puts his hand on someone's shoulder and asks if anyone has seen Frim. Then the boss notices what everyone is watching with such enthusiasm. Frim is skillfully controlling the flow of water. Noticing Dogger, she happily reports that she cleaned the toilet and hallway. The boss pushes people aside and approaches the girl. She proudly announces that everything is much cleaner now. Dogger pats her on the head, praising her for her work. Frim is going to do everything she can. She is not going to just live in danger. The boss suggests going to eat, and the girl enthusiastically agrees. She is ready to do anything to survive. Frim is confident that with her knowledge in water magic, she will succeed no matter what. Dogger reflects that his team has a really strange child. Frim possesses water magic and knows too much for her age, and the boss has never seen hair like this girl's before. Dogger took Frim into his team because he was sure that she was much more than she seemed at first glance. The boss calls out to his subordinate and asks when the girl started working for Pakis. She reminds Dogger that he himself decided that all newcomers would go to the guy. The boss asks again, uncertain, but the woman assures him that Dogger ordered it firmly and clearly, even though he was drunk as a skunk. Pakis was terribly happy then. The boss thoughtfully says that he ended up taking Frim in any way, especially since she would probably have had a worse time with Pakis. In any case, the girl turned out to be a good choice. Here Frim, having warned about herself in advance, enters the room. The girl whispers her greeting because those gathered inside are engaged in lively conversation. One of the subordinates, turning to his boss, remarks that the crowd in the casino is dwindling. Frim frowns, thinking that Mr. Morga will upset the man again. Another employee joins the conversation and explains that it's all because of Lookats, who has opened his own place and is luring customers away. Dogger listens thoughtfully. Then he suddenly asks Frim if she has any ideas. The girl asks again, confused. After receiving confirmation, she tries to come up with something. She has seen similar things in her world and could offer something, but it would be suspicious for a child to give such advice. Frim nervously says aloud that she has never been to a casino. Dogger interrupts her in a thunderous voice, and the girl hastily apologizes. But it turns out that the boss just wants Morga to give Frim a tour of the casino. The girl timidly asks when she is supposed to work. He sternly replies that her job is to follow his orders. He adds that Frim usually comes up with the most interesting ideas, and he needs something fresh. The boss notes that he is counting on her. Morga calls the girl over, and she obediently follows him. Frim wonders what is going on in the casino. She has never been interested in it, and in her world, she never went to such establishments. The girl looks in horror at the man who crashes into the wall with all his might. The crowd roars as they watch the ring, which is fenced off with bars. They cheer on the winner, urging him to kill his opponent. Frim grimaces, realizing that she has literally stumbled onto a battlefield. She sees the next participant being rushed in, pulled by a chain. The girl notices the collars and realizes that these are slaves, who are being forced to kill each other with weapons. Frim is not at all sure that this is legal. Then she remembers the coins they were counting. The girl reproaches herself for not immediately guessing the bloody origin of this. All this money came from the public, who enjoy watching such carnage. Even the food Frim received was paid for with money earned from betting. She feels nauseous. The girl realizes with horror that one mistake, and she too will end up here. She vomited. Morga asks anxiously if everything is all right. Frim apologizes, lying that it's because of the smell. She adds that she'll go take a look around. The girl sees more and more horrors. Frim even finds it difficult to watch the cruelty unfolding before her eyes. She thought she would be helping people with her knowledge and magic. How naive and superficial Frim was. Reality turned out to be much harsher than the girl had imagined. She regrets that she can't do anything, that she can't save the slaves. Right now, Frim cannot help the dying, and she still has to complete the task her boss gave her. She hopes that if she succeeds, she will be able to change something, at least a little. The girl calls out to Morga. She asks him to take her to where the slaves are kept. In the corridor, Frim meets a guy coming out of a room. He greets the girl warmly. She says hi back. She remembers that he's like Pakis's brother named Rad. The guy asks how Pakis is doing. The girl explains that she is working for Dogger today. Rad asks what brought Frim to this place. The girl says that her boss told her to come up with some ideas for the casino because he wants to try something new, so Frim decided to check out the slave market. Rad says that makes sense and asks if she came alone. She explains that she was with Morga, but he fell asleep, and the guy laughs understandingly. He lets Frim pass, since that is Dogger's order, but warns her to be careful. This place is not safe. A girl as small as she is could easily be trampled there. Inside, Frim is greeted by cages. Noticing the visitor, the slaves grab the bars, laughing and wondering what the girl is staring at. Remembering the warning, Frim nervously continues on her way. Some scream and rush at the bars, reaching out their hands to the girl, while others just sit huddled in a corner. Frim looks back, thinking bitterly about why these slaves have to endure all this if they are people just like everyone else. Suddenly, a heavy hand falls on the girl's shoulder, and its owner asks if Frim is lost. She cries out in fear. The stranger rushes to calm her down, promising that he will not harm her. The girl looks at the man's scarred lips. The stranger introduces himself. His name is Logan. He is the chief slave master. He hopes he doesn't scare Frim. The man has no hair and wears a collar around his neck. Hesitating, Frim also gives her name. She quickly asks for a little time, if Logan isn't too busy, of course. The girl adds that she came here on Dogger's orders. Crouching down to be at eye level with Frim, Logan asks if she is alone. She replies that she was with Morga, but he had a bit too much to drink. The man offers Frim a seat, and the girl thanks him. He pulls up a chair for her. Frim doesn't understand why he didn't choose a chair. But then she notices the collar, and she realizes that the man is also a slave. Since the boss sent the girl here, she must be higher in status than Logan. In that case, of course, he is not allowed to sit on the same level as Frim. The girl realizes with horror that Logan cannot be her equal. Tears well up in Frim's eyes, and she begins to cry bitterly. Her companion asks anxiously if everything is all right. The girl apologizes, but cannot stop. The tears keep flowing. Logan asks her to calm down. Frim knows that just by coming to this place, she has already ruined everything for the man, and this realization hurts her deeply. The girl resolutely wipes her eyes with her fists. She can't even cry in front of the slaves. She apologizes again, and she tells Logan that she has a request. Frim begs him to tell her what the casino is all about. The girl quickly leaves the casino, almost running down the corridor. This place seems monstrous to her. The entire room is saturated with cruelty, filth, hunger, and disease. This is how slaves have to live, but now Frim has the opportunity to help them a little. Every moment the girl hesitated, more and more slaves died. Out of breath, Frim stops in front of the office door. She realizes that even Logan, who had been so kind to her, could end up in that terrible ring. The girl cannot simply turn a blind eye to this. She resolutely pulls the handle and throws open the door. Dogger looks up, greets Frim, and asks if she has found inspiration. The girl is sure she can do something, despite her age. She approaches her boss and answers in the affirmative. Frim is ready to save every life she can. The girl resolutely announces that she has an idea. Dogger and Frim watch what is happening in the ring. The girl was given the task of coming up with something new for the casino, but not something stupid. In addition, her idea had to somehow improve the living conditions of the slaves. Only one of Frim's ideas met all the criteria, so she presented it to her boss. Dogger remarks that it's hard to believe that a child came up with it. The game has already made a name for itself. In boxing, slaves fight with their fists. The boss and his subordinates had never heard of such competitions. It was boxing that Frim suggested. The girl modestly replies that she is always happy to help. The goal was to attract people's attention so that they would want to place bets. A combination of casino and competition is perfect for this. To increase interest in the original sport, Frim developed new rules. Dogger notes that the advantage of a new competition is that the slaves will not die immediately. He praises the girl, and she thanks him. Frim suggests that the next task will be cleaning. This will improve the slaves' lives a little. The boss asks again in surprise. The girl explains that it will be better for hygiene, and people will speak well of this place. Dogger thoughtfully acknowledges that Frim's words make sense and allows them to start immediately, since this is not the first time he has heard about cleaning. Then he asks if, in the girl's opinion, the living conditions of the slaves really matter at all. The girl, stammering with excitement, explains that healthy slaves are easier to sell. She adds, watching the slaves clean up can be very entertaining. After a pause, Dogger agrees. He assigns this task to Frim, telling her to do it when she has time. The girl understands that the slaves will still be traumatized. Even though they now fight without weapons, boxing is still dangerous. But Frim is still glad that the slaves' lives have become at least a little bit better. Dogger, already approaching the door, turns around. He tells the girl that if any of the slaves hurt her, she has the right to kill them. Frim immediately refuses, explaining that this would reduce the number of workers. The boss decides not to argue. The girl quietly admits that she is still afraid to watch people die. Dogger asks again, but Frim replies that she didn't say anything. The boss adds that he has something for the girl and asks her to come see him later. Dogger hands Frim a book tied with 2 straps. She asks what it is. The boss replies that it is a reward for Frim. If she wants, she can read or study. He adds that the book seems to be grimoire water magic, but he is not sure if it will be of any use. Dogger was going to sell it, but realized it might be useful to the girl. Frim hugs the book to her chest and thanks the boss. She flips through the pages and notices that the letters are unfamiliar to her, but for some reason, she understands everything. According to her memories, Frim loved to study. However, the girl does not know where exactly the girl studied. Her head is splitting. The boss's subordinates call out to Frim, saying that it's not fair and that they also want something. Dogger intervenes angrily, suggesting that they come up with something useful themselves first. They agree with a sigh. Frim laughs quietly. Soon, the girl is lying on her bed, reading a book. The text contains a lot of details and information about water magic. She immerses herself in reading. But the book is very difficult to understand. Frim doesn't understand much, but she does come to a few conclusions. As she discovers, magic is created with the help of countless ghosts that fly around. People call them, and they respond by using magic. Simply put, a person channels magic through their body, but character and its properties also play a significant role. However, the most important thing is imagination. Frim decides to experiment right away. Stretching out her palms, she summons water and commands it to take shape. The drop splits into several parts and then comes back together. Now the water takes the shape of a pencil. The girl gasps in admiration and picks up the pencil. She runs it across her palm, trying to write. Nothing comes out, but water is still necessary for life. Frim thinks about how to use her new knowledge to her advantage. She decides that she could use something for cleaning right now. The girl summons alkaline electrified water. A large drop appears in front of her. Outwardly, it looks no different from ordinary water. Frim smiles uncertainly, not sure if it worked or not. As she walks, the girl thinks that she can create things from hydrogen and oxygen. She decides to try to conjure up ozone. When nothing seems to happen, Frim realizes that it's not that simple. It seems that saying the name of the chemical formula is not enough. But then a sharp smell reaches her nostrils. She pinches her nose and tries not to breathe. The girl rushes down the corridor. She coughs and catches her breath. Frim, smiling tensely, admits that it was something with something. Then the girl remembers that ozone comes from machines and is used to get rid of odors. However, Frim never imagined that she would one day be able to do something like this with magic. Ozone is used in various ways, but it is quite toxic. The girl realizes that she has just created something dangerous. Putting her hand on her chest, Frim notices with relief that her heart is beating calmly again. Sighing, the girl decides to take a break and have a snack. This will help Frim calm her nerves and relax. A girl enters the room and sits down next to the boss. In the back of the room, Dogger's subordinates are talking about something. The boss asks what's wrong. Frem replies gloomily that she's just a little hungry. Dogger tells her to help herself to whatever she wants. The girl obediently agrees. To her surprise, she notices that she has become surprisingly close to the boss. She calls out to Dogger and tells him that she has learned a new spell. He jumps up from his seat, remarks that she is a quick learner, and asks what the spell is. After a pause, Frem admits that it seems to be poison. He asks again, tense. The girl remembers the story about her boss's departure and decides she should explain herself. She explains that she can eliminate bad smells and purify rooms. But this is due to poisonous gas or a ghost, and therefore the air around becomes unbearable. Frem exclaims that this is magic and asks him to praise her. Dogger obediently agrees. He admits that although he didn't understand anything, the girl is very clever. The girl turns away and smiles. She couldn't mention ozone, so she had to explain everything in a very confusing and strange way. Frem enthusiastically suggests trying this spell sometime. She explains that if the boss remembers what it's like, he'll be able to tell if there's poison in the air. Dogger raises his hand, and the girl grimly decides that she has gone too far. The boss pats Frem on the head, and with a smile, he notes that she is a good subordinate. Stroking the girl's hair, he tells her to keep up the good work. Folding his arms across his chest, Dogger asks Frem if she means that bad smells mean poison. She replies that in a sense, yes. The boss is silent, lost in thought, then suddenly utters one word, cleaning. The girl asks in surprise. Dogger squeezes the armrest with his fingers and reminds her that Frem said to clean up. He jumps up from his chair and announces that from now on, as soon as the casino closes, they will clean up there. The boss chases his subordinates out of the room, sending them to sweep. The girl doesn't understand how this happened, but she is nevertheless pleased. Even though she didn't ask for it, it's a good opportunity. Soon Dogger is standing in the middle of the casino, bossing people around, ordering them to clean everything up again. Frem glances at him tensely. Meanwhile, the subordinates are scrubbing the surfaces with all their might. They don't seem too happy about the order. The boss turns to the girl, clutching the book. She timidly reminds him that all that's left is to clean the places where the slaves live. Dogger assigns this task to Frem herself. The girl asks if she can take Logan with her, because she is small and the slaves simply won't take her seriously. The boss agrees, allowing Frem to do as she pleases. The girl walks down the corridor. She knows that the boss and his team weren't going to sort everything out in one day. Dogger looked very stunned, and Frem wonders how the poison affected him. She quickens her pace. The girl is happy that she's allowed to clean the slaves' rooms as she pleases. Entering the dungeon, Frem bows to Logan, saying she is happy to work with him. He replies tensely that she shouldn't have bowed. The girl asks the man to help her with the slaves. Logan agrees, but explains that the slaves don't know what to do. He adds that Frem should stay alert and pay attention. The girl stands on a box, and the slaves gather around her. Frem announces in a trembling voice that they will send the slaves to wash. Logan asks uncertainly if they are allowed to do that. The girl explains that she's allowed to do whatever she wants, so everything is fine. Frem is ready to begin and approaches the basin. First, she needs to fill the container with water. She turns on the tap and thinks it would be better if the water were warm. The girl wonders if she can change the temperature. Frem is going to try. She commands the warm water to appear, and she happily notes that it worked. The girl is happy, but suddenly feels weak. Frem faints, while Logan calls out to her anxiously. The girl sees the silhouette of a dark-haired boy in front of her. She is shocked to recognize the very child whose rescue cost her life. Frem rushes to him and rejoices that the boy has survived. The child turns abruptly, holding the ball tightly in his hands. He asks sharply why she saved him. Frem reaches out her hand to the child, and suddenly she wakes up. She is lying in bed and realizes that it was all just a dream. Dogger enters the room and notices that the girl has already woken up. Frem laughs awkwardly and says that she seems to have lost consciousness while trying out a new spell. She notes to herself that she feels very awkward waking up in front of her boss. Her heart is pounding. Dogger says that Logan was terribly frightened. He orders the girl to stay in bed, and she obediently agrees. Frem sits up in bed and timidly calls out to her boss. The girl says that she is the only one to blame for what happened and asks him not to punish the slaves. He agrees with slight irritation, but reminds Frem to rest in bed all day. Dogger leaves, and the girl clutches the blanket in her hands. She never thought it would turn out so badly. Frem decides that she will be more careful in the future and will only practice magic in safe places from now on. The girl stretches out her hands and summons a drop. She watches it for a few moments. Frem falls onto the bed. She regrets that she still can't make ice. The girl knows how to heat water, but for some reason, she can't cool it. Frem wonders what the problem is. Maybe she needs to practice more, or maybe she needs to imagine it differently. She wearily puts her palm on her forehead, admitting that she doesn't know the reason. Frim opens her eyes with a sigh. She sits up abruptly in bed, surprised to realize that she has fallen asleep again. The girl decides that it's all because of her extreme fatigue. Suddenly, she notices something on the table. Frim realizes with confusion that her boss left food for her, although she doesn't know the reason for his concern. Sometime later, the girl apologizes profusely to Logan. He waves his hands awkwardly, trying to stop Frim. He asks if she is feeling better. Logan admits that he was very frightened when Frim fainted. The girl hastily assures him that she is fine and offers to continue cleaning. After a moment's hesitation, the man agrees, but asks Frim to be more careful. He crouches down to be at the same level as the girl. Logan says that they're all very grateful to Frim, but something else is bothering them. He gently takes the girl's hand in his and adds that he doesn't know what will happen to the slaves if something happens to Frim. Logan advises the girl to take good care of herself. He notes that if the incident repeats itself, all the slaves will lose their heads in every sense of the word. Frim apologizes again and promises to be more careful. Logan gets up and suggests they get to work. The girl enthusiastically agrees. Soon, the slaves are washing the floors while Frim releases jets of water. Logan timidly asks if the girl is feeling well, as she is using magic nonstop. Frim cheerfully replies that she is not tired because she is creating cold water. This surprises the man, and he asks if the girl has made a contract with a ghost. She says no and notes that for some reason, she is able to create a large amount of water. Slaves wash the walls and wipe the tables. Finally, Frim wipes the sweat from her forehead wearily. She suggests calling a day. Logan is holding a bucket. The girl has only managed to fill one bucket with warm water. She asks to share it with those who have worked hard today. The man smiles and thanks Frim as she leaves. She herself can't wait to take a bath, because she hasn't been able to do so yet. She catches the eye of a slave who is glaring at her. The girl sadly admits that many prisoners look at her as if they wish her dead. Frim meets Dogger, who is carrying a stack of books somewhere. The boss asks how her magic training is going. Sitting down on a chair, she happily replies that everything is fine. Dogger is pleased to hear this and allows her to practice as much as she wants. Frim thanks him and asks if she can do her magic first and then clean up. The boss agrees, and the girl happily leans back in her chair. Frim climbs onto the roof of the building. She notices that hardly anyone ever comes here. The girl looks down. She thinks happily that no one could possibly climb over the fence. Frim lights a fire. She wants to try a spell with oxygen and hydrogen. During her last experiment, she produced ozone, so the girl assumes that she will be able to control other elements, such as water. Oxygen will add fuel to the fire. This should help Frim visualize everything better. To begin with, the girl asks for just a little oxygen to appear. The fire continues to burn, and Frim realizes with confusion that nothing has happened. She thinks the problem is the quantity. In desperation, she tries to summon oxygen and hydrogen, both separately and together. The girl falls to the floor, disappointed that nothing is working. Getting up, she wonders if perhaps the wind is to blame, carrying away most of the gas. Or maybe it's the ratio of hydrogen to oxygen. Frim remembers something similar from her rocket science class. She is afraid to conduct experiments with explosive substances while standing right next to them. The girl decides to try again. But first, she summons water, commanding it to take the form of a shield. Frim creates a rod of water with oxygen inside, a double formation of water. She tries to shape it, but the rod falls apart, turning into a puddle. The girl realizes wearily that everything is much more complicated than it seemed at first glance. However, Frim is confident that everything will work out if she continues to practice. She creates various objects out of water. The girl notices that simple shapes are quite easy to make, but more complex figures are already difficult to achieve. Frim creates a butterfly out of water and watches it fly away. The girl thinks that this is the only thing she can do so far. She tries to catch the butterfly, but fails. Frim happily exclaims that she just caught a creature she created with her own hands. She admits that it was humiliating. The girl decides to get back to work because she will have to return soon. Of course, it's scary to get close to the substances, but that way everything will definitely work out. Frim thinks that since oxygen escapes into the air, more structure should be added. She commands the oxygen and hydrogen to combine into water and appear. A drop floats in front of her, and Frim thinks everything has worked out. The girl flattens it, giving it the shape of a disc. She throws it. There is an explosion, and Frim looks at what has happened with admiration. The girl gasps and watches as the disc flies down. She decides she needs to go and retrieve it. Frim notices with confusion that for some reason a whole crowd of people has gathered on the street. Among them, she recognizes Lookats, an enemy of the mafia. Morga even drew his portrait for the girl so that she would remember his appearance. Frim doesn't understand what he is doing here. Lookats is surprised to see something fall. Then one of the mafia's subordinates jumps out of the courtyard, thinking they are being attacked. Frim listens in horror. The mafia member recognizes Lookats and angrily asks what he is doing here. He shouts that they have been caught. The girl covers her mouth with her hand. Downstairs, someone is about to be dragged through the mud. Frim realizes in despair that everything is spiraling out of control. She decides it's time to tell the boss everything and jumps to her feet. The girl runs down the hallway as fast as she can and calls out to Dogger. She tells him there's a fight outside, and he calmly replies that he knows. He orders Frim to hide somewhere. The subordinates note that the rats should stay where they are and play, and promise to return soon. The girl obediently hides behind the boxes. She thinks it's good that she warned the boss and his employees. However, Frim has no idea what will happen if they find out about the girl's ability to blow things up, and realize that she's not just a pet. Most likely, Frim will be used as a weapon. Soon, Dogger's satisfied men burst into the room, announcing that they have taught Lookats a lesson he will not soon forget. Frim leaves her hiding place, praises them, and hands them a cup of water. They thank her. One brags about the number of people he defeated, another says he knocked out more people. They immediately start arguing about it. The boss, meanwhile, asks Frim if she is okay. She replies in a trembling voice that everything is fine. Dogger wonders if something happened while the girl was practicing magic. She feigns confusion and asks again. The boss stops mid-sentence and asks her to forget about it. Frim wonders if Dogger noticed anything. She decides she is lucky that the boss did not press her. The girl imagines what would happen if he found out. Dogger would force her to kill people if he found out what she could do with magic. Frim is sure that this is how it will be. She decides it's best to keep quiet about it. The girl rushes out of the room, announcing that she is leaving. Frim closes the door, and Dogger watches her go. A wicked grin appears on his face. The girl gets down to cleaning in earnest. At this rate, the slaves and Frim will soon finish their work. Logan informs the girl of this. Frim thanks him, gratefully noting that he is always ready to come to the rescue. He asks her not to exaggerate. He adds that they are former soldiers, so physical help is the only thing they can offer. Frim argues passionately, saying she couldn't have done it without Logan. She expresses her hope that he will continue to help her in the future. As he leaves, Logan asks Frim to take care of herself. The girl thinks Logan is very kind. She can even imagine him relaxing in a cafe and drinking coffee, with a white dog sitting at his feet. Frim hopes that everything will be fine with Logan. The girl decides that the cleaning in the dungeon is finished. Now she's going to return to her boss and do the accounting. Dogger calls out to Frim and tells her that he is going to introduce her to a nobleman. The girl turns to her boss, frozen with a coin in her hand. She asks again, confused. The boss says he knows this man, so Frim can be herself. There's a knock at the door. Dogger notices that the nobleman has returned and invites him in. From the doorway, he says that the boss has cleaned up nicely. Dogger adds that the casino has also gained popularity recently. He calls out to Frim, asking what she is doing. She is kneeling with her forehead pressed to the floor. She explains that she is not allowed to look at nobles without permission. The boss lifts the girl up by her waist, causing Frim to gasp, and asks her to stop worrying. He adds that although the visitor may look scary, he is kind at heart. Frim sees a perfect copy of Dogger. The stranger smiles at the girl. Frim calls out in amazement to her boss, who is holding her at eye level with the nobleman. The stranger laughs heartily, asking if Dogger really didn't tell the girl anything. She frowns in confusion. After laughing, the nobleman introduces himself. His name is Varsal Drajan. He adds that he is Dogger's brother, as Frim has probably already noticed. The girl realizes that the boss and the nobleman are identical twins. Frim, in turn, introduces herself, saying embarrassedly that the brothers really do look very similar. Varsal smiles cheerfully and agrees. He tells the girl that when she last helped with the money, it was him with her, not Dogger. Frim is sure he is lying, and he laughs and admits that he is. He laughs until he cries and adds that the girl is simply gorgeous. Dogger smirks and remarks that it's rude, but he has nothing to say in response. The boss puts Frim down on the floor and kneels down to be at the same level as the girl. Dogger asks Frim if she wants to work with his brother. The girl asks again in surprise. Soon all three are sitting at the table. The brothers sit opposite each other, and Frim sits at the head. Dogger explains the girl's tasks to her. She will have to clean the statues belonging to the Drajan family. He adds that a regular brush has no effect, so the boss decided that Frim's magic could come in handy. The girl thinks to herself that it's easier said than done. She suspects that if she breaks anything, they will simply kill her. Frim raises her hand and timidly asks if she can ask an honest question. Varsal smiles and allows it. The girl begins by explaining that it is difficult to clean the dirt in the room because it will stain everything around it. In addition, the statues could break, depending on their strength. She adds that in this case, Frim will not be to blame. Varsal agrees with everything. He cheerfully says that he understands everything and tells the girl that she can get to work. Frim turns away so that Varsal cannot see her unhappy face and promises to do everything in her power. A bottle appears on the table. Its contents are poured into mugs. Dogger explains that Varsal is a nobleman who looks after the area. Although he does not own any land, he is still a big fish in a small pond. Frim decides that Varsal must be the mayor. The boss explains that the birth of twins is considered a bad omen, so he was excluded from the family. However, the brothers have maintained a warm relationship, even though Varsal is the one who runs the town. Frim remarks that this is impressive, and Dogger agrees. She innocently asks why the boss was expelled, since Dogger and Varsal are twins, and therefore there is no difference between them. The boss's expression changes, and he asks if the girl dares to repeat her words. Frim realizes with horror that she has gone too far. She lowers her eyes and hastily apologizes. Dogger waves it off, advising her not to worry about it, and takes a sip from his mug. He explains that Varsal possesses earth magic. For example, the building they are in was built from bricks he created, as were most of the houses in this city. Dogger adds grimly that he does not have such abilities. Frim responds passionately that the boss has many good qualities. He does not argue and says that he was lucky to learn the art of magic, so he can always become stronger. Thanks to this teaching, Dogger can also rake in big money. In addition, he has subordinates. He pours the contents of Frim's bottle, saying that he can't shortchange her, especially since the drink is a gift for Varsal. The girl thanks him enthusiastically. To herself, she thinks that this is wrong because she is still a child. Frim takes a sip and immediately starts coughing. Dogger asks anxiously if she is okay. The girl is already sniffling. The boss asks again if Frim is feeling well. The girl replies that everything is spinning before her eyes. Dogger picks Frim up, apologizing for what happened. He tells someone that before they leave, they need to take care of the girl. The boss adds that he cannot let Frim go alone, so either Logan or Almaroy will accompany her. Dogger hands the girl over to the former. Frim recognizes the slave who looked at her so unkindly in the dungeon. He glares at the girl again. The slave, who takes part in battles, looks as if he is half human and half lizard. Someone else approaches. Dogger announces that Pakis will also go with Frim. The girl looks anxiously at her former boss. Dogger orders Pakis to obey Frim in everything. The girl notes that the boy looks beside himself. Logan timidly asks permission to ask his boss something. The boss asks what's the matter. The slave timidly reminds him that some places are only accessible to women. He suggests taking one of the women with them, since they cannot accompany Frim. Dogger praises Logan for his prudence. He says to take a couple of girls with them. Logan carries Frim in his arms. Pakis walks past her and whispers that she shouldn't get cocky. He advises her to go kill herself. The girl looks anxiously over Logan's shoulder as Pakis walks away. She doesn't understand what's wrong with the boy. Logan pulls her out of her thoughts. He says that among the slaves for battle, there is Makia. Although she is somewhat cruel, she is excellent at her job. Frim instantly agrees and asks who else they will take. Logan thinks and turns to Almaroy. He asks if he can suggest anyone. A contemptuous expression remains on the boy's face, but he still names one person, Tallarine. Almaroy adds that she is his younger sister. He explains indifferently that if she hasn't been sold, she's still in the building. Frim smiles tensely, thinking that the boy is talking as if everything is normal. Soon, the companions go to meet the girls. Makia introduces herself with a broad smile. Behind her stands Tallarine, timidly saying that she is happy to meet everyone. Then she notices Almaroy and her expression changes completely. Beaming, the girl calls out to her brother. He just glances at her sullenly, not deigning to answer Tallarine. Logan intervenes in the conversation, explaining to the girl that there is work for her. Tallarine sadly agrees. Frim watches the upset girl walk away. At the mansion, the group is greeted by a statue of Varsal. The owner of the house cheerfully comes out to greet the visitors. Frim says he would be happy to work with him. Then Varsal notices Pakis and greets him with a smile, ruffling his hair. Pakis frowns in displeasure. Frim notices how many statues there are on the site. Varsal explains that they represent all the nobles in the country. He adds that there are about 60 sculptures. The girl notes that the statues are very dirty, and the stone looks very fragile. She asks if she will be okay if the sculptures suddenly break. Varsal promises that there will be no problems. He adds that the statues are in this condition after an unsuccessful attempt to wash them, so all hope rests on Frim and her magic. Laughing, Varsal says that destroying all the sculptures would be too much, but if she wants to, it's better to start with the one he's pointing to. The girl thinks that some of them can be destroyed. Frim asks Varsal to step aside a little, as she plans to start spraying. He obediently moves away. The girl summons her magic, and Varsal cries out in admiration. Frim turns to him, and the man instantly falls silent. She gives Varsal a murderous look, and the nobleman says that he already understands everything and that she can stop glaring at him. He promises to watch from the sidelines and not interfere. Varsal walks away disappointed. He wanted to see everything up close. Frim turns to her companions. She suggests they start assigning tasks. Her companions look at her silently, and the girl asks if everything is okay. Tallarine gently says that Frim is simply amazing for her age. She adds that the girl doesn't hesitate when she gets down to work. Frim replies shyly that she just has experience. She returns to assigning tasks. The girl asks Logan to stay and help her, and sends the others to clean up the surroundings. Pacus cries out in annoyance. He remarks mockingly that Frim has raised her status, and now the boy is her subordinate. Pacus brings his face close to the girl's and angrily asks what kind of nonsense this is. Frim realizes that he has reached his limit. She calmly replies that it was the boss who assigned him the task. Pacus yells that he doesn't care. He swings his fist, demanding that the girl remember her place once and for all. Frim covers herself with her hands, but the blow never comes. Logan, Makia, and Almaroy hold Pacus back, some by his arms, others by his clothes. Tallarine covers her mouth with her hand in horror. Pacus turns to his companions in confusion. Logan explains that he has been ordered to protect Frim. The boy demands to be released immediately. He tries to break free from the man's grip. Pacus curses everyone around him, calling them useless trash. Logan asks Frim for permission to calm the boy down. Makia gives the girl an encouraging hug around the shoulders. Frim reluctantly agrees and asks not to kill Pacus. He continues to slander his companions. He promises to kill the girl. Makia crouches down and asks if Frim is okay. She has tears in her eyes. She knows that what happened was not just bad, but truly terrible. Makia holds Pacus by the shoulders as he sits. Logan stands next to them, and Frim watches from the sidelines. Although everyone has calmed down, but the girl realizes that the jokes are over, and now it's serious. Makia throws the boy over her shoulder. Frim asks her and Logan to explain everything to Dogger. She herself will not go with them, because she needs to stay here. The man says to leave it to them, and Makia exhales irritably, wondering what kind of job this is. The girl turns to her brother and sister standing nearby. She thanks them for their help and accidentally mispronounces Almaroy's name. He remarks that they didn't do anything special, and corrects Frim. She gasps in embarrassment. She apologizes, admitting that she did not remember his name. The girl offers to return to work with a shy smile. Almaroy and Tallarine leave with their mops at the ready, while Frim begins to wash the pedestal. The girl feels the servant's eyes on her back. They have been watching them work for a long time. Frim realizes that, for them, it's like watching a cleaning video for people in her world. The girl cups her hands around her mouth and calls out to her brother and sister. She suggests they take a break. Frim fills their mugs with water. Tallarine thanks her and takes a sip. The girl freezes in shock, then marvels at the taste. She advises Almaroy to try it too. He looks at the cup doubtfully, but takes a small sip anyway. To Tallarine's surprise, he simply says that it tastes good. Frim watches the conversation between her brother and sister. She decides that they definitely have something to talk about. The girl announces that she is going to the bathroom for a moment. Tallarine immediately replies that she will go with her. Frim hurriedly says that they can't leave, so it's better for them to stay where they are, and she'll try to come back as soon as possible. Gradually walking away, the girl looks back. The brother and sister are enjoying their conversation. A smile even appears on Almaroy's face, and Tallarine laughs. Frim herself is happy. It is getting dark, and lights come on in the windows of the mansion. Varsal sinks into the bathtub with pleasure, enjoying the water. Frim watches him gloomily. She doesn't like watching Varsal splash around and wash himself. She turns away in irritation. Frim, of course, doesn't mind creating a little hot water, but she doesn't like the fact that the nobleman considers her some kind of boiler. Varsal notes that her water is filled with mana. Frim thanks him for his kind words. The nobleman asks how the work is progressing. The girl bows and replies that although they had a small problem, everything is fine now. She adds that they have already cleaned 12 statues. Varsal notes that her magic is impressive. He recalls hearing something about an argument with Pacus. Frim smiles irritably. She explains that she used to be the boy's subordinate, but now that the girl has risen in status, Pacus can't stand it. Varsal casually replies that there's nothing to be done about it. He asks Frim not to blame herself, because Dogger is the only one to blame for everything from the very beginning. The girl asks what he means. Varsal explains that his brother did not take into account Pacus's current age. Frim frowns. The nobleman changes the subject and asks her to pour him some more water. The girl obediently agrees. Meanwhile, Pakis is curled up in the middle of the room. He looks sadly at the floor. The boy still remembers the words of his father, Dogger. He asked doubtfully if Pakis was really his child. That day, the boy's mother and father were drunk. He was just a mistake made during a party. His mother always insisted that Pakis would be better off without a father, and the boy agreed. But one day, his mother started coughing. At the time, it seemed like a common cold. Pakis asked if everything would be okay. His mother assured him that she just needed to rest, and she would be fine. The boy advised her not to overdo it. His mother never recovered. Then there was a quarrel in his father's office. Pakis asked for help, because he was his son after all, but Dogger just sat there with his arms crossed, ignoring his pleas. He said that Pakis' mother herself had said she had no money. The boy wanted to say something, but his father didn't give him the chance. Dogger said that if Pakis needed money, he had to earn it himself. The boy said nothing more to him. Pakis ran out into the street and rushed home in the pouring rain. He cursed his father desperately, hoping he would die. Gasping for breath, Pakis leaned against the front door. Finally, he entered the dark house. His mother was lying on the bed, fast asleep. The boy looked at her for a few moments and clenched his fists resolutely. Pakis' brothers taught him all the tricks of the trade so that the boy could earn his own money. Now he knew how to make money, how to poison his rivals, fight, and extort money. Pakis even learned how to kill. After some time, the boy acquired a subordinate, a little girl who was brought to him. She was clumsy, quiet, and hardly spoke. To be honest, the girl was more of a burden to Pakis. Nevertheless, he taught her as he had been taught. Then Pakis was shocked by the news. He was told that Frim was now working directly for Dogger. His informant had noticed that the boss liked this girl. Pakis cursed desperately. When he got home, the boy visited his mother. She was lying in bed and gently asked her son for forgiveness. He smiled and replied that everything was fine and told her to rest peacefully. Pakis sat down on a chair next to the bed. His mother asked him if he was having any problems at work. The boy said that he had been given a ward, but she was slow and useless. His mother replied that this was normal and asked him to be kinder to the girl. Pakis did not argue. His mother quietly asked if Dogger was treating him well. Pakis clenched the edge of the blanket so tightly that his knuckles turned white. However, he kept a smile on his face and replied that everything was fine. Pakis's life took a turn for the worse. No matter what the boy tried, nothing worked out for him. After the beating, he wiped his face and clenched his teeth. Everything went wrong when Frim left. He was sure that it was worth subduing her and teaching her a lesson. So Pakis decided to threaten the girl with a knife, putting her in her place. Dogger leaned over the boy lying on the floor. He said that Frim was useful to him and asked why Pakis had tried to kill her. The boy spat in his face, saying that he was a terrible father. In response to his insolence, he was slapped. While Pakis was clearing his throat, Dogger said he was sure Frim and the boy would make up, but it turned out the way it did. He added that Pakis had gone too far, and it was time to learn a lesson. Dogger locked his son behind bars. The boy lay exhausted on the floor. He was sure that now he was definitely finished. Frim walks down the hallway of a luxurious mansion, accompanied by Talarine and Almaroy. The girl wonders when Logan and Makia will return. Frim thought they would just take Pakis away and come back in a moment. She's afraid that the boy lied and his companions were punished instead of him. The girl clutches her head in horror, cursing herself for not thinking of this right away. Around the corner, Frim notices Makia and Logan talking intently about something. The girl rushes towards them, happy that they have returned safe and sound. However, they greet her with silence and frowns. Frim asks in confusion, "What's wrong?" Makia scratches the back of his head, while Logan instantly breaks into a smile and hastily replies that everything is fine. He apologizes for worrying Frim so much. The girl realizes that the slaves simply don't know how to respond to concern because no one used to care about them. She explains that she was very worried because Logan and Makia had been gone for so long. Frim asks her to tell her everything in detail as they walk into the room. The girl opens the bedroom door and asks her companions to sit down on a chair. A giggle comes from under the blanket. Someone remarks that Frim is very kind to the slaves. The girl turns around in alarm, realizing that someone is in the bed. The blanket is thrown back, and a young man sits up in bed, cheerfully greeting the newcomers. Frim recognizes Pakis' brother, remembering that they talked at the entrance to the arena. He says he just wanted to surprise the girl and adds that he came here with Pakis. Frim, addressing the guy respectfully, remarks that they haven't seen each other in a long time. Now the girl remembers that she often saw him talking to Pakis. Frim is surprised that they get along. The guy smiles and says she can just call him by his name. He adds that it will be useful for her work. The girl's expression changes. She realizes with horror that she doesn't remember the boy's name. Hesitating, Frim honestly admits that she has forgotten his name because Pakis always just called him brother. The boy laughs and says he's just joking. He says his name is Mulad, but the girl can just call him Yud. The boy decides to get down to business. With a sly smile, he asks Frim to explain why Pakis was so angry. The girl looks at Mute in fear. She stammers, not knowing what to say. She is afraid that she is in trouble. She really doesn't like the smirk on the guy's face. Frim doesn't seem to sense any danger from Yud. However, if she answers incorrectly, she will likely get into trouble. She explains that Pakis was her boss. And, smiling nervously, she suggests that the boy doesn't like the fact that he will now be her subordinate. Mude's expression becomes friendly again. He says he understands everything and remarks that the girl is very lucky. Frim wonders to herself, noticing that Mude doesn't seem angry about the argument with Pakis. The girl apologizes to the boy for disturbing him. Mude turns away and waves his hand. He replies that everything is fine, especially since it was Pakis who was at fault. Mude says it's late and advises Frim to go to bed. The girl stammers and agrees. Frim turns around and is surprised to see her companions. Makia is lying on the floor, Logan is leaning against the fireplace, and the brother and sister are standing, looking at them. The girl calls out to her subordinates and suggests that they go to bed. Logan replies that sleeping in the same conditions as Mude is disrespectful. Frim notes that the people from a mansion have provided this room for their use. If they do not use it for its intended purpose, they will offend their hosts. She asks Mude if this is really okay. He looks surprised. He replies that he allows them to sleep in the beds. The girl happily thanks him. The candle is extinguished. Frim and Mude lie in adjacent beds. The boy notices that the girl is indeed very kind to the slaves. Frim pulls the blanket up to her neck and replies that she is their boss. She adds that these slaves belong to the boss, and therefore the girl is obliged to take care of them. Frim turns her head toward Mude. She says that even though they are slaves, they are still people. After a pause, the boy replies that he understands her and turns his back on the girl. They wish each other good night. The next day, Makia holds Frim so that she can reach the statue's head with a stream of water. They have been in Varsal's mansion for several days now. Frim does some quick calculations in her head and realizes that at this rate, they will finish cleaning tomorrow. All this time, Mude has been actively helping the group with the cleaning, so the girl has begun to think that he is not so bad after all. However, Frim interrupts her thoughts, reminding herself how people in this world think. Varsal approaches the girl and her companions. He informs them that the remaining sculptures do not need to be cleaned. Frim asks in surprise. The nobleman explains irritably that the statues belong to a family of stone magicians with whom his house does not get along. Varsal adds that they don't even need to start cleaning these sculptures. He won't be upset in the slightest if they happen to break. Frim thinks this is very petty. Folding his arms, the nobleman admits that each sculpture is popular among noble people, so he himself cannot break these statues. This circumstance annoys him greatly. Frim remarks admiringly that all these people immortalized in sculpture were the founders of the nation. Varsal replies that this is indeed the case and adds that every detail, such as clothing, has a specific meaning, and the statues themselves represent specific domains. Seeing Frim's surprised look, Varsal smiles and says that this world is full of meaning, just like the fact that a girl can use so much magic. He adds that Frim may have noble blood running through her veins. The girl replies that she is a child of the streets because she was abandoned when she was very young. She curses herself for her words. Frim doesn't understand why she thought that. Then a heavy hand ruffles her hair until the girl's head starts to spin. Varsal notices that Frim has also had a hard time. The girl freezes in shock. The nobleman explains that he and Dogger were on bad terms with their father. Varsal adds that he was the heir, while his brother was simply kicked out of the family. Frim thinks that all people are burdened with something. In this sense, worlds are no different. Varsal shows Frim the statues and explains that they depict water mages. He advises the girl to remember this and stick to it in the future. Frim feels like she has seen them somewhere before. Sometime later, Varsal cheerfully calls out to someone and orders him to twist the knife without mercy when he wounds an enemy. The man stutters and agrees. The nobleman gathers Frim and her entire group in the dining room. He announces that he has prepared a feast for them and allows them to eat as much as they want. The girl asks if she is sure. Varsal explains that since Frim and her companions will finish cleaning tomorrow, he wants to feed them properly. Until now, the nobleman had not had time to do so and decided to make amends by being more hospitable. The girl sincerely thanks the owner of the mansion. She invites her group to start eating. Her companions enjoy every bite. Then Varsal asks Frim to fill his water supply. The nobleman liked the taste so much that he can't believe he won't be able to enjoy this drink anymore. The girl is ready and asks if she should bring a cup. Varsal orders the vessels to be brought in. Frim fills another container. The nobleman enjoys the taste of the water and serves another glass. The girl feels like a gas station attendant filling up cars' tanks. Varsal is sure that there is mana in the water because it has a very special taste. He wonders if Frim really could have been born in some mansion. The girl feels uncomfortable working under such a watchful gaze. Varsal looks around at the results of the cleaning with admiring cries. Everything is sparkling and shining, the statues and the staircase. He concludes that it turned out very well indeed. The nobleman adds that he did not think that Frim and her companions would be able to clean the entire mansion. Varsal hands over the box, announcing that it is a reward. Mizu, kneeling, thanks the nobleman and accepts the box. The girl does not understand why the boy is taking the box. She decides that since Mizu is the boss here, everything must be fine. Then Varsal calls out to Frim and hands her a book. He explains that it is a water grimoire that the nobleman found while cleaning. Varsal found a copy, so the girl can safely take one of the copies. Frim warmly thanks the nobleman as she accepts the grimoire. The nobleman instructs her to polish her skills. He adds that no matter how sharp or dull a sword is, rust will ruin any of them. The girl wonders if everything in this world is expressed so strangely. Frim promises aloud to try her best. She thanks Varsal for his hospitality. She bows to the nobleman. Mizu notes that it's time to return to the casino, and the girl agrees. Varsal waves goodbye to them. Mizu turns into a dark alley. Frim looks around anxiously. She's not at all sure that they took this route to the mansion. Suddenly, Mizu stops and asks if he can take the grimoire. The girl, though puzzled, agrees and hands the book to the guy. He stuffs it into a bag under Frim's confused gaze. Mizu apologizes and advises the girl to blame it all on bad luck. He turns around abruptly. The usual smile disappears from Mizu's face, and he points a sharp dagger at Frim. He orders her not to tell anyone about what happened. The girl realizes with horror that she has been outsmarted and that they want to take all her money. She scolds herself for losing her grip. With a tense smile, Frim replies that she can't promise anything, because she'll have to tell Dogger if he asks her anything. Mizu agrees and promises to sort everything out later, but for now, the girl will do as he says. Then Makia appears in front of Frim. She shields the girl and asks Mizu what is going on. He smiles unpleasantly. He orders her not. Mizu, kneeling, thanks the nobleman and accepts the box. The girl does not understand why the boy is taking the box. She decides that since Mizu is the boss here, everything must be fine. Then Varsal calls out to Frim and hands her a book. He explains that it is a water grimoire that the nobleman found while cleaning. Varsal found a copy, so the girl can safely take one of the copies. Frim warmly thanks the nobleman as she accepts the grimoire. The nobleman instructs her to polish her skills. He adds that no matter how sharp or dull a sword is, rust will ruin any of them. The girl wonders if everything in this world is expressed so strangely. Frim promises aloud to try her best. She thanks Varsal for his hospitality. She bows to the nobleman. Mizu notes that it's time to return to the casino, and the girl agrees. Varsal waves goodbye to them. Mizu turns into a dark alley. Frim looks around anxiously. She's not at all sure that they took this route to the mansion. Suddenly, Mizu stops and asks if he can take the grimoire. The girl, though puzzled, agrees and hands the book to the guy. He stuffs it into a bag under Frim's confused gaze. Mizu apologizes and advises the girl to blame it all on bad luck. He turns around abruptly. The usual smile disappears from Mizu's face, and he points a sharp dagger at Frim. He orders her not to tell anyone about what happened. The girl realizes with horror that she has been outsmarted and that they want to take all her money. She scolds herself for losing her grip. With a tense smile, Frim replies that she can't promise anything, because she'll have to tell Dogger if he asks her anything. Mizu agrees and promises to sort everything out later, but for now, the girl will do as he says. Then Makia appears in front of Frim. She shields the girl and asks Mizu what is going on. He smiles unpleasantly. He orders her not to move or say anything. Makia shudders. Frim watches him tensely. Mizu informs her that if Makia takes another step, she will remain here forever. He again orders her to be silent. Makia lunges at the guy, but suddenly stops abruptly. Gasping, she reaches for her throat. The woman suddenly collapses to the ground. Frim squeals and reaches fearfully toward Makia. Mizu coldly remarks that it's useless. Behind the guy stands Logan with darkened eyes. Frim looks on in confusion as the slave leans over Makia. He throws the woman over his shoulder. The girl sees that Logan is capable of moving, but is obeying orders. She sadly realizes that this means the slave is working with Mizu. Frim stares blankly at the floor as Logan disappears around the corner with Makia. Mizu approaches the girl and apologizes. He orders Frim to stay away. The guy allows Logan to knock the girl out if she dares to scream. He adds that they frown and glare at the girl. Frim sits with her arms around her knees, her back pressed against the wall. She looks sadly into the distance. The girl wonders if half a day has already passed. Suddenly, there is a knock, and Frim opens her eyes wide. The door handle clicks. The girl looks up. The door swings open. A gloomy dogger stands in the doorway. Frim calls out to him in surprise. The boss informs her that the little rascals have been up to no good. He orders them to come out. Frim, not understanding anything, gets up and leaves the room. Outside, the girl sees Pakis and Mizu looking gloomy, the latter with a bruise on his cheek. The former looks at Frim from under his eyebrows. Mizu apologizes to the girl. Dogger silently looks at her, his arms crossed over his chest. Frim asks in confusion what all this means. The girl is told the story from the beginning. It was all done for Riki's, Pakis' mother. Mizu, who was close to the boy, also respected his mother. Everything changed when Riki's fell seriously ill and money was urgently needed for her treatment. After Pakis and Frim quarreled, Mizu caught the boy trying to steal from his boss. Riki's was in critical condition, and the money was needed urgently. Mizu found himself in a hopeless situation. Then he decided to spend the reward he had received from Varsal on medicine. The boy took the grimoire with him just in case the money wasn't enough. In the end, Mizu managed to buy the medicine, but Dogger discovered it. Logan apologizes to Frim. She asks why he joined the boys in the first place. Mizu answers her. He explains that the girl would definitely have been killed since Pakis was involved. Logan was well aware of the relationship between the boy and Frim. Mizu decided to deal with everything himself before the situation got worse. Then Logan came to his aid. He explains that the slave did everything for Frim. Logan sadly lowers his head. Mizu urges Pakis to apologize as well. He adds that trying to stab the girl with a knife is beyond the pale. Moreover, it was only thanks to Frim that they found the money for medicine. Pakis looks away and mumbles an apology. The girl, smiling tensely, asks him not to rush at her with a knife again. He clicks his tongue and turns away. Frim frowns, unsure whether the boy feels even a hint of remorse. Dogger also apologizes and promises to buy the girl anything she wants. Frim thinks for a moment, then beams and replies that she wants the staff she read about. The boss remarks irritably that it will cost him a lot. Frim had no idea that the staff was so expensive. Dogger sighs heavily, but agrees. After all, the main thing is that it benefits the girl. He adds that there is something else. The boss hands Frim a bag. The girl takes it, opens it, and finds that it is filled with coins. Dogger explains that Frim has done a great job. The bets are going well. This is extra money that the girl can keep for herself. Frim thinks that these coins were meant for Mrs. Riki's. It seems that word of the girl's cleaning skills has spread throughout the city. She has already cleaned the brothel and auction house run by Dogger. Every day, from morning till night, Frim was busy with work. The boss asked Varsal for help in getting the staff. However, Varsal couldn't help right away because he was busy with some ceremony, which takes up a lot of his time. Because of this celebration, many people have flocked to the royal capital, and Dogger's gang is living the high life. Frim sits gloomily on the bed. There's a mountain of clothes piled up on the floor. The girl gloomily remarks that she simply cannot sleep because of the terrible stench. All these things were sent as a thank you for cleaning. Frim doesn't understand why. She doesn't want to wear old clothes at all, and it seems that wearing worn-out items of clothing is not yet considered normal. On top of that, all the clothes are saturated with a terrible smell of perfume. The girl's nose is already falling off from this scent. Frim, her eyes glazed over from lack of sleep, raises her hand and opens the door. Soon, the girl enters the room where Dogger and his subordinates are sitting. The boss turns to the newcomer and asks what happened. Noticing her appearance, he asks if Frim is okay. One of his employees says that the girl looks like she is about to faint and her eyes are strange, as if empty. Frim stops and says she has some work-related suggestions she would like to discuss. Puzzled, Dogger agrees. The girl's eyes widen and she almost shouts. Her first thought is about the coins, or rather, counting them. There's too much money, the quality is simply disgusting, and it is clearly not worth using. Frim suggests putting it in a broken bottle and measuring its approximate weight, as this will be much easier. The boss's subordinates listen to her with their mouths open. The girl doesn't stop there. Her next suggestion is to introduce a form for the casino. It is also worth coming up with more different games of chance. Frim suggests holding races between small animals. Such a competition will attract more female visitors, improve the atmosphere, and also raise the status of the casino. Dogger listens attentively to the girl, scratching his chin. Then Frim bangs his fist on the table with all his might. She is about to move on to her last and most important suggestion. The girl thinks they could open their own dry cleaning business. That way, they can make the most of the slaves who are now out of work. Frim imagines how the business would work. She thanks her listeners for their attention. The girl turns to her silent subordinates and Dogger himself. They stare at her with wide eyes. Frim sternly informs them in the same tone that they will discuss the details tomorrow. She asks to be allowed to spend the night in the room. The boss hesitates, but agrees, warning her that it might be a little noisy in the room. The girl replies that she doesn't care and heads decisively toward the sofa. After settling down and covering herself with a blanket, Frim wishes Dogger a good night. The boss nervously agrees. He orders his subordinates to be quiet, and they nod in unison. Frim opens her eyes with a heavy sigh. She sits down on the sofa and, looking around in confusion, asks why she slept here and what happened in general. Dogger and his subordinates silently turn to her. The boss replies that everything is fine, that the girl is probably just very tired. Frim apologizes sheepishly and says that she thinks she has done something wrong. Dogger approaches the sofa and calmly remarks that children need to eat and sleep well in order to grow. He suggests that the girl have breakfast first and then tell him about her suggestions for improvement. Frim repeats the word suggestions syllable by syllable, puzzled. He nods and asks her to explain everything in as much detail as possible. Dogger looks questioningly at the girl. Frim wonders in horror what she could have said before going to bed. To be continued. The heroes gather in the dungeon. Logan asks again about the laundry room. Frim nods with a nervous smile. Makia asks what she'll be doing in that case, adding that she's never done anything like this before. Frim replies that the girl surely has a good sense of smell, since beastfolk blood runs through her veins. The girl suggests that Makia oversee the work and also take charge of the final scent check. Of course, the first part of the duties might seem a bit strict, but there will still be those who don't want to work. Makia smiles broadly, pounds her chest, and declares that she understands everything. Frim turns to Almaroy and asks him to take charge of teaching the laundry duties, as well as to make sure no one cuts corners. The guy gives a brief nod. Frim turns to Talarine and explains to the girl that she will have to issue instructions on the procedure. She happily agrees, and she enthusiastically tells Almaroy that they'll be able to work together. Her brother shows no reaction. However, Talarine, beaming, notices that Almaroy is also very happy. Frim can't believe that happiness looks like this. It turns out that all this time, Almaroy wasn't looking at her with contempt at all. Talarine, noticing the reaction of those gathered, pokes her brother with a finger and explains that it's hard for him to express his emotions. She asks, "Can't you tell that Almaroy is extremely happy right now?" Makia, Logan, and Frim all reply in unison that they don't understand. Gathering everything they need for laundry, the team heads to the spot. Frim asks her companions how they became slaves. The girl adds that if they don't want to talk about it, they don't have to answer, but she'd be very interested to hear the story. Makia speaks first. She used to be an adventurer and hunted monsters, until one day her friend got into debt and ran away. Becoming a slave was a better option than working in a brothel or going to war. That's how Makia ended up here. She turns to the brother and sister and asks what their story is. Talarine explains that although they are lizard-like, human blood predominates in them. Their native swamps had dried up due to a drought. They had neither water nor food. That is why Talarine and Almaroy were sold from the village as inferior lizard-like creatures. But it's not that simple. Almaroy joins the conversation. He admits that he killed the master, and immediately adds that Talarine was not to blame for anything. Makia looks at him in bewilderment and asks him to repeat himself. Apologizing, Talarine replies that her brother expresses his thoughts in a somewhat confusing way. The slave trader who bought the brother and sister was convinced he was purchasing genuine, strong lizard-like creatures. Smiling, Talarine adds that he even complained that he had been cheated. Then the slave trader got very drunk and hit the girl. Almaroy, who had been locked in another room, broke down the door and came to Talarine's rescue. The house they were in was quite small. The blow caused a beam to fall, and it accidentally landed right on the slave trader. Almaroy briefly explains that it was an accident. Talarine adds that the deceased slave trader owed Dogger a great deal of money, and that is how she and her brother ended up with him. Almaroy was immediately put to work as a combat slave. Talarine, on the other hand, took up sewing since she and her brother's parents had been excellent seamstresses. Frim looks visibly sad. Logan turns to the girl and gently remarks that she shouldn't let all these stories weigh too heavily on her mind. The whole team is the same. After all, everyone is fighting desperately just to keep going. Be that as it may, everyone is alive, and this is entirely thanks to Frim's care. She timidly looks up and sees the warmth in the other's eyes. Even a hint of a smile appears on Almaroy's face. Frim blushes and agrees with Logan, adding that she got a little carried away. The girl smiles herself and suggests they get to work. First, they'll tackle the pile of clothes in Frim's room. She can't wait to sort through all these things. Of course, it might not be entirely right to mix personal matters with work and overstep her authority, but it seems that without even realizing it, she has now become a bad girl. The team gets to work. The clothes are placed in a basin. Frim summons water magic, and a stream of water shoots from her hands. The girl smiles contentedly. She hadn't expected the magic to come in so handy. The main character had once seen on TV how ultrasound removes stains from fabric. The dirt disappeared right before her eyes. Frim recalls that hydrogen peroxide seems to work well for laundry too, so she can both bleach and disinfect. The girl hopes that thanks to this, everything will go smoothly. Frim looks gloomy. Dogger notices this and asks what's wrong. The girl admits that the laundry isn't going well. The problem is that even though the clothes get clean, they wear out very quickly. Because of the poor quality of the clothes themselves, they quickly become unusable. Dogger nods and suggests recycling the damaged items. Frim asks again, puzzled. Dogger explains that when the ceremony in the capital comes to an end, a huge amount of second-hand clothing will appear on the market. While it's still cheap, they can buy it up and sew it together with the damaged fabrics. That way, nothing will go to waste. Smiling, Dogger concludes that this is how they'll end up with a sewing department. Since they decided to go into business, they might as well do it on a grand scale. Frim listens intently and notes that this is exactly what one would expect from a boss who commands hundreds of people. Dogger nods and ruffles the girl's hair. Frim advises the boss to assign tasks to those who can handle them. She adds that he doesn't have to distribute the money himself. At that moment, Frim realizes she's put her foot in her mouth and hurriedly apologizes. Dogger calmly replies that she's right. He places his hand on the girl's head and remarks that Frim's words are absolutely true and have struck a chord with him. Dogger explains that in his youth he was often deceived and let down, which caused him to lose trust in people. Now everything is going well, and perhaps nothing needs to change. At least, that's what the boss used to think. Frim calls out to Dogger. She used to think the boss was a scoundrel and a villain who would stop at nothing and wouldn't hesitate to kill people. But it turned out that wasn't the case at all. In this world, such things aren't uncommon. Dogger's people are uneducated and, because of this, don't understand what is good and what is bad. Discipline and obedience are strictly instilled in subordinates to maintain order. In this world, everyone is desperately fighting for survival. Tiredly closing his eyes, Dogger notices that the number of people is growing, while his brothers are too distrustful and constantly steal money from one another. The boss realizes that things cannot go on this way. He, too, needs to realize his responsibility as the leader. Frim looks intently at Dogger, realizing that he lives according to his own convictions. He jumps to his feet after the boss. The girl smiles and promises him she'll do her very best. The carriage drives through the city, watched by the gathered onlookers. The boy looks out the window and sighs wistfully. The ceremony is held in the capital, as has traditionally been the case since the days of their ancestors. However, tradition is tradition, but visiting so many houses is an incredibly tedious task. The carriage stops. The young man asks if he remembers correctly that today is the Drajan family's house. His butler nods. The young man scratches the back of his head in embarrassment upon seeing his statue. At the estate's entrance, he is greeted by a statue of Varsal. Soon the young man is already climbing the stairs. He didn't even notice how he ended up inside the house. However, something seems unfamiliar. Everything is polished to a shine, and this applies not only to the statues, but also to the walls and even the staircase. The young man runs his finger along the banister, and it remains spotless, without a single speck of dust. The Drajans themselves could not have achieved such order. The young man wonders aloud what on earth is going on in this mansion. The butler, after a moment's thought, replies that the Drajan family most likely has an acquaintance who possesses a special kind of magic. The young man snorts, and a broad smile lights up his face. He finds this information extremely interesting. Varsal bursts into the room where Dogger and the heroine are already waiting. His face contorted with panic, he shouts to his brother that they want to take Frim away. Dogger asks in confusion. Varsal explains that, of course, work is work, but this concerns the royal palace itself. They need water there. Dogger jumps up from his chair and in the blink of an eye is next to his brother, grabbing him by the shirt. The boss realizes that Varsal has ratted out Frim to the brother's father. The latter asks to be heard. Their father could show up at any moment anyway, so Varsal hurriedly fled work to get to Dogger quickly. He continues his story. As soon as Varsal mentioned that a personal mage was cleaning the statues on his estate, the higher-ups immediately took a keen interest in the information. Dogger won't listen to excuses and shouts that Varsal is to blame for everything and, as usual, brings nothing but trouble. His brother gasps for air and breaks free. Dogger lets go of Varsal, who is trying to catch his breath. He approaches Frim and asks what they should do. Dogger suggests running away. The heroine is nervous, unsure of how to act. Varsal stops Dogger, reminding him that the order of the royal of the palace is law. If Frim runs away, not only the boss, but the entire household will be in danger. Dogger reluctantly agrees with his brother. Frim asks, "What should we do about the job?" The boss admits that he doesn't know either. He adds that since the royal household has asked, the girl can't refuse. Clenching her fist, Frim notes that if she runs away, the casino will also be in danger. The main character adds that they called her because they saw how clean the statues had become. Smiling, she says hopefully that if she works hard, everything will work out. Varsal and Dogger listen to her in surprise. Frim reminds her that both brothers entrusted her with the task because they trusted the girl. Now the heroine wants to trust them both as well. Frim adds passionately that other nobles will also recognize her work. Dogger reluctantly agrees, since the girl feels that way. However, he sternly asks the main character to be careful. She enthusiastically promises him she will. Varsal indignantly reminds his brother that he got slapped in the face. He immediately explodes, shouting that he's the one who got himself into this mess, and he's the one who's going to have to clean it up. Dogger adds that it's about time Varsal did some work. After all, the wall just collapsed. He angrily retorts that his brother was the one who introduced him to Frim, so he shouldn't get so upset. The main character sadly sits down on a chair in the dungeon. Logan asks if it's true that the girl is going to the royal palace. Frim nods sadly. Logan unwraps the bundle and hands the contents to the girl. She asks in surprise, "What is this?" Logan says it's a wooden cup and spoon. He explains that at the palace, those of lower status who don't have their own tableware might not even be given a proper meal. Frim thanks Logan and accepts the gift. The main character thinks that even though there's some awkwardness between her and the slave after all that commotion with Muto, he still cares about her. Logan crouches down and asks Frim to take care of herself, and she replies that she'll try. Dogger and the main character are standing in the room. The boss explains that he'll show Frim his special secret place. The girl notices a black door and sees Dogger reaching his hand into it. A magical device is most likely hidden there. Suddenly, the boss yanks the door with all his might, and Frim is flung aside. Dogger turns around, wondering why the girl is screaming, and urges her to go inside before anyone spots the passage. Frim obediently follows the boss. She marvels at the expensive items hidden in the room. Now the heroine understands why this place is a secret. Dogger takes out some items, remarking that it never hurts to be careful. He hands them to Frim, suggesting she try them on. Smiling, the boss explains that one should wear appropriate clothing when entering the palace. Dogger turns away. The main character, having changed, calls out to him. Frim asks what the boss thinks of her outfit. He replies that she looks lovely and that everything suits her perfectly. The main character timidly asks if it's normal for the clothes to be so expensive. Dogger says there's no point in leaving the clothes behind anyway. He also pulls out a pouch of money and hands it to Frim. She's not at all sure she'll be able to pay him back. The boss reassures her. He explains that all these items are kept just in case. He adds seriously that all sorts of people can be found in the palace, and she mustn't appear weak. Dogger isn't sure Frim has enough money, but the boss believes the main character will manage everything. The girl, clutching the items to her chest, thanks the man profusely. Dogger reminds her that only 2 items remain, the knife and the staff. As for the latter, Varsal is in charge of that. Frim notes that he's still busy. Dogger insists that the staff is absolutely necessary. Mages are treated completely differently depending on whether they have it or not. Dogger bends down again and starts rummaging through his things. As he does so, he explains that a staff and its owner must be compatible. Of course, some mages manage without one, but with the right one, everything is completely different. Sighing, Dogger says that his father also tried to find a staff for him, but never found the right one. Frim asks again, and the boss immediately replies that he said too much and asks her to forget what he said. Noticing the look on Dogger's face, the girl feels awkward. Frim changes the subject, showing the staff she found. It's small, and the girl will find it easy to carry around. Dogger nods, adding that it's a staff of the dark element. Frim's eyes widen at what she hears. She notices that the magic suits her well. The boss snorts, wondering if the girl is a secret assassin. She feels uneasy about this conversation. Finally, Dogger declares that although there are some nuances, it's better than having no staff at all. He tells the girl to keep it. Frim hesitates, then agrees. It's getting dark outside. Varsal enters the room, announcing that he has come to meet Frim. Someone's hand immediately covers his mouth. Dogger fiercely orders his brother to stop making noise. Frim is fast asleep on the bed. Dogger explains that the girl fell asleep while reading. Varsal nods understandingly, since the main character is still a child. Dogger tells his brother to carry the girl away and not wake her. He wants Frim to get a good night's sleep, since she must be exhausted from everything that's been happening. Varsal agrees, saying he wants the same thing, and asks his brother not to worry. Dogger orders the nobleman to bring Frim back safe and sound. Varsal smirks, and after apologizing, he replies that he cannot promise that. Dogger immediately pounces on him, demanding that he swear an oath and hitting his brother. The latter demands that the casino boss stop hitting him on the shoulder. The servant shouts to silence them, because Frim is almost waking up. With a gasp, the main character opens her eyes wide. She looks around, but doesn't recognize the place she's in. Frim calls out to the boss in fear, thinking she's been kidnapped. Varsal calms her down. The girl apologizes, realizing she had simply fallen asleep. Varsal cuts her off and suggests she take a look outside instead. The main character immediately presses her face against the window. Varsal shows her the royal palace, and Frim gasps in awe. She carefully examines the magnificent building. The carriage pulls up to the castle gates, where 2 guards are waiting. Varsal announces that from now on, Frim will be working in the palace. The nobleman and the main character pass the guard, and they go inside. The girl can't believe she'll have to clean here. Varsal smirks and adds that he is immediately assigning all the work to Frim. The main character sighs heavily. She hasn't done anything all day and now hopes she'll have plenty of time. Varsal explained to her that for now, her task is simply to wait. Frim wonders how long this will last. The main character is led into a luxurious office. She's a little scared and feels out of place. The carpet under her feet feels very soft. Then, from behind the door, Varsal calls out to the girl, and she rushes over to him in a flash. The nobleman says he wants to introduce someone to Frim. He points to a man. The man greets her warmly and introduces himself. His name is Neek Lesson. The main character replies that she's glad to meet him. Varsal explains that he asked Neek to look after Frim, since he himself won't always be able to be there. Varsal informs her that the girl will have to wait. It's unclear when she'll be summoned, so the nobleman advises Frim to be patient, as the wait might last several days. Varsal understands that being cooped up all the time will be boring, and tells her that she is free to use the courtyard as she pleases. She can even practice magic there. Frim is delighted by his words. Now she won't have to be bored. The heroine steps out into the courtyard. She swings her staff and summons a water sword. A jet of water strikes the tree. Frim tries to train properly while she has free time. It's quite difficult to control magic with a staff. She can only use half her power. The girl looks around. She'd like to tidy up, but she clearly shouldn't touch anything without permission. With a snort, Frim notices that her training has helped change the way people around her treat her. Before, she was seen as just a commoner with cleaning tools, but now she's considered a respected mage. The main character chuckles quietly, thinking that this isn't so bad after all. Just then, someone calls out to Frim. The girl turns around and sees a young man. She notices his dark hair and his torn sleeves. The main character wonders who it could be. Although the stranger's clothes look like rags, the boy's hair and nails are clean. His clothes look as if they're meant for cleaning. The young man looks friendly. Glancing at Frim, the boy decides she comes from a wealthy family and asks the main character about it. She looks at him in confusion, not knowing what to say. The young man smiles good-naturedly at Frim. The main character, hesitating timidly, asks if they can talk. Spreading his arms, the young man answers in the affirmative, explaining that he himself is merely a servant's apprentice. The girl thinks they don't have such strange apprentices. Out loud, however, Frim remarks that the young man surely serves an aristocrat anyway. She explains that she herself works for a merchant and is therefore considered commoner. The girl adds that it would be better to address the young man respectfully. He finds Frim amusing. The young man admits that he is a nobleman, though in essence he is no different from a commoner. He invites the main character to speak freely with him. Frim had no doubts about the young man's background, but she agrees with him. She feels that the young man treats her like a little child. Then the young man remembers something, and he takes out some sweets. He offers the girl a treat to share. Frim's attention is drawn to the handkerchief the candies are wrapped in. It's insanely expensive. The girl wonders who this young man is. He seems suspicious to her, and she can't imagine what he wants. The main character says out loud that she'll take the candy later. The boy says they're delicious and calls the girl strange. He asks again why Frim is here. She says she can't tell him everything, but in short, she has to clean up using magic. In the meantime, the heroine has been forced to wait. It's been 10 days already, and she wants to go home. The young man exclaims indignantly that this is terrible. The guy says he'd like to know more and calls Frim into the room. She's afraid he's up to something. Only someone important can use a private room in the castle. The main character doesn't know who this handsome guy is, and she suspects he's after little girls. Just then, luckily for Frim, the cook pokes his head out of the room and calls out to her. He needs water. The girl is glad for the sudden rescue. She apologizes to the young man and hurries to get to work. He says goodbye and watches her go. A smile appears on the young man's face. The main character tells Neek what happened. She places the sweets on the table in the tent. Neek asks about the suspicious guy. Frim explains that he gave her some candy and invited her to come into his room with him. Neek asks anxiously if the girl ate the treat. She shakes her head, explaining that she was afraid there might be poison inside the sweets. Neek paces the room thoughtfully. Finally, he says that he'll report what happened to Varsal, just in case. Neek adds that he'll take the candy and destroy it. Frim bows and thanks him. The appearance of a suspected pervert in the palace has caused a commotion and sparked panic. The heroine sadly remarks that she thought they had finally called her to clean up, but this is what happened instead. Varsal replies that they'll have to work hard. He apologizes and says he won't be able to stay by the girl's side all the time. Varsal adds that he's now leaving it all up to Frim. She doesn't argue. The main character sheepishly admits that everyone got alarmed because of the suspicious person she spotted. She apologizes for giving Varsal extra work. He asks the girl not to worry about it. He tells her that there are tools stored in the hut and Frim can use them as she pleases. They approach the shed. After a moment's pause, the main character asks if it's possible to live there. She notes that the cabin has all the necessary cleaning supplies and the door locked securely. Frim asks if she can stay in this room. Varsal asks again in surprise. The girl explains that this will serve as a safeguard against any suspicious individuals. Although the hut is a bit dirty, the door is much sturdier than the one in Frim's room, and there are no windows. The main character adds that the building is hidden behind trees and hard to spot, so she'll be safe here. To herself, Frim admits that she just wants a little personal space. Varsal hesitantly agrees, but wants to say something else. The main character stops him, noting that no one will come to the hut, since few people know about Frim's work. A stranger won't find a girl just like. Varsal nods and advises the main character to strike the stranger with offensive magic if he suddenly shows up again. She agrees. Frim stands in the courtyard next to the fountain. She pulls on her gloves. She extends her arms and summons water. Streams of water shoot from her palms. The heroine smiles contentedly and giggles, noting that the results of her training are evident. She has more water spells now, and Frim has gotten used to controlling them. In her mind, she orders the stranger to attack from wherever he pleases. The main character laughs loudly. A couple people watch her from the terrace. After that, the cleanup went smoothly. The stranger never showed up again. They never found him. Frim wonders, as she cleans up, why that suspicious guy even came over in the first place. She wonders what will happen to him if they do catch him. Varsal distracts the main character by calling her to eat. The girl agrees immediately. Varsal brings her food twice a day. Frim has figured out that mealtimes in the palace depend on social status. Rumor has it that the leftovers from the higher-ups go to those of lower status. But even so, the girl isn't going hungry. And it's all thanks to the fact that Varsal always brings Frim sweets to keep her full. Just now, after the main character finished her portion, the nobleman opened a container and gave her a package of treats, which the girl found very tasty. Frim, glancing at Varsal, thinks that the box in his hands looks like a dangerous contraption. Deciding that the moment is right to ask, the main character remarks that she has never seen the head of the Drajan household. The nobleman responds, explaining that now that the royal castle is no longer a battlefield, it needs repairs, which Varsal's father and daughter are currently working on. The curious girl asks for more details. Crossing his arms over his chest, Varsal explains that all these events took place before Frim was even born. At that time, a dispute arose over the right to inherit the throne. Because of this, the entire country was plunged into utter chaos. The nobles began to fight among themselves. This led to a battle, the consequences of which are still felt today. Cursing, Varsal remarks irritably that now all of this has to be sorted out. Frim realizes that the nobleman was very angry. The main character asks, who is on the throne now? With a snort, Varsal replies that it is a young but decent king who understands the laws of the world well. Then the ruler made his thoughts crystal clear. He shouted that everyone could believe whatever they wanted, but why seize power? The king added angrily that if people kill each other, nothing will remain, and no family in this country will be needed. If this continues, neighboring states will ruin their homeland. The king fiercely wondered if this message was getting through to his listeners. With a wink, Varsal finishes his retelling and remarks that the speech was impressive. Fortunately, the war has ended, and now the cleanup is in full swing. Frim replies admiringly that the king is truly remarkable. Varsal, raising his fist, agrees fervently. He lists the king's virtues, exceptional swordsmanship, chiseled features, and the ruler also possesses a rare spirit of darkness. Frim admits that he knows little specifically about darkness, but he remembers that the four great elements have recognized masters. Varsal notes that the main character learns quickly and well. He explains that for each element there is one great aristocrat, a master. There are houses that aspire to take their place. Fire has 3 great masters, wind has 4, earth has 2, and water has 1. Frim asks about the last one. Varsal explains that water originally had 4 great masters, but then one disappeared due to internal strife, and another vanished because of a war on the border. The remaining pair clashed in battle with fire, and then united through marriage. The heroine notes that his story differs greatly from what she has read. Varsal replies that this is because the events are quite recent. Frim now understands why the element of water is rare. There were few people who possessed it to begin with. The heroine wonders if the state can protect those who possess this magic now. After all, the girl is still young. She pauses to think, but then she pushes the thought aside. They certainly won't drag her into the turmoil. Outside, Frim is desperately called by a guy who seems suspicious to the main character. The girl immediately looks gloomy upon recognizing him. The young man apologizes for their previous encounter and says that he got a serious scolding last time. He asks how Frim is doing. She tells him to stay away and draws a boundary with water. The boy meekly agrees and asks what the main character's name is. Frim introduces herself. The young man snorts and asks what the girl's last name is. She replies that she doesn't have one. The main character adds angrily that it's rude to ask for her name without giving his first. The boy raises his eyebrows. But then, with a nervous smile, he apologizes. Frim asks his name again. Stammering, the young man introduces himself as Komu. The main character asks about his family name. Komu, hesitating, replies that he is from Rogeria. Frim doesn't believe him at all and thinks the guy is very suspicious. She seriously considers giving Komu a good blast with a water spell. Sighing, the main character quickly says it's time for her to get to work. The boy tries to stop her, but she walks away. Frim tells Varsal about her new encounter with the guy, and she mentions his name. The heroine adds that the young man is still a bit strange. Varsal explains that Rogeria is the surname of a well-known and respected chancellor. He asks if the guy had a coat of arms. Frim asks again, not understanding. Varsal explains that all the country's aristocrats have a family coat of arms, which is displayed prominently on their clothing, especially if the person comes from the chancellor's family. The main character replies that there was no coat of arms. Varsal declares that Komu is very suspicious and advises Frim to scream or drive the boy away with magic the next time she meets him. The nobleman hands the girl a knife and explains that it's just in case. Varsal demonstrates how to use it. The main character watches him gloomily. Varsal asks Frim to draw a portrait of Komu so she can capture his features. The heroine obediently picks up a pen. Varsal examines the drawing. He notices that none of the chancellor's relatives have features such as black eyes and hair. Varsal summons a guard. He places the sheet with the portrait into a box, on the lid of which a fire is burning. Frim watches his actions closely. The result is the exact same image. The main character realizes that it is some kind of copying device that uses fire. The guard salutes Frim, thanking him for his help. He's ready to get to work. The guard figures out which insolent fool decided to use the chancellor's name. Frim thinks he'll definitely finish off Komu someday. Varsal calls out to the main character and asks her to be careful. The nobleman explains that since the suspicious young man has visited her several times, he must definitely want something. He advises Frim to lock her door securely and stay alert. She nods. The main character steps out into the courtyard, and she passes through the archway. She wonders where to go next. Suddenly, there are more places that require her attention. Suddenly, someone says that the girl is doing well. A smiling man stands before Frim. The main character doesn't know who he is and asks what he wants. The man leans closer to the girl and asks if Frim would like to work in his house. She asks again, confused. Just then, another man calls out to the first one. He says he had his eye on the main character earlier and tells his rival to mind his own business. In an instant, Frim is surrounded by a crowd, all scrambling to hand her gifts from their lords. The girl realizes, bewildered, that they are trying to poach her. She thinks about the possibility of working somewhere else. After a somber silence, Frim raises her head resolutely. Apologizing, she announces that she has no intention of leaving her current master. Her answer shocks the crowd. One of the men asks if the girl even understands what she's saying. After all, everyone knows it's much better to serve a nobleman than a merchant. Everyone else picks up on his words, and the argument flares up again. The crowd eagerly offers to take her in to serve them, and no one else. Frim finally finds the strength to shout down the argumenters. She reiterates that she is very grateful for their offers and admits that she probably just doesn't understand how honorable this is. One of the nobles, seizing the opportunity, tries to speak up again, but the heroine cuts him off. She firmly declares that she will not betray her master for any amount of money. Frim adds that the nobles surely believe such a person cannot be trusted. She returns the bag of money to them and asks them to leave. The heroine lowers her head. Someone calls out to her and asks her to look at him. Frim obediently looks up. The nobles look at her kindly. The most sociable among them admits that they are asking too much, and he returns the bag of money to the girl, explaining that it is a gift for her. With a chuckle, the assembled nobles remark that for a commoner, Frim knows perfectly well what loyalty is, and they praise her. They advise her to continue remaining loyal to her master. The heroine fidgets awkwardly, at a loss for words. It seems she has suddenly earned their respect. Soon, Frim is sitting at the dinner table with Varsal. He confidently declares that there is nothing strange about everyone respecting the main character. The girl asks, why is that? Varsal explains that during the struggle for the throne, terrible things always happen. It has become commonplace to take bribes and betray everyone left and right. Someone clears their throat loudly. A man with a broad smile adds that the main character even tried to return a gift. That alone was enough to inspire admiration. The man cheerfully declares that Dogger is very lucky to have such a subordinate. Varsal calls out to Forbrin as he enters and scolds him, noting that he's scaring Frim. He adds that not only does the man look intimidating, but he's also shouting at the top of his lungs. Forbrin cheerfully replies that he has no intention of changing. Sir Forbrin is the knight who tracked down the suspicious young man. Now his duty is to protect Frim. They say Forbrin is an important figure in the Red Dragon Order. The knight is acquainted with both Varsal and Dogger. Apparently, Forbrin has been on good terms with the Drajan family since childhood. The knight loudly orders the main character not to get distracted, but to eat properly, because children grow exactly as much as they eat. Varsal wonders if Frim will then end up the same size as Forbrin. The girl freezes, imagining the scene. Then Varsal, remembering something, calls out to the main character and tells her he has good news. Frim asks, what is it? Varsal announces that they did find and catch that suspicious guy after all. He adds that the young man appears to have been executed. The heroine freezes in shock, unable to believe her ears. Through the haze, she hears Varsal and Forbrin talking. The guard remarks that it's too soon to let her guard down. Varsal agrees, adding that the girl will have to remain under guard for a while longer. But Frim isn't listening. The same thought keeps running through her mind. They executed him. The girl refuses to believe that the young man has been executed. The protagonist freezes, staring at a single point. Varsal, noticing how pale she has become, calls out to the girl, asking what's wrong. Frim quietly apologizes, saying she'll go to her room. Varsal agrees, looking confused. Back in her hut, Frim feels sick. She vomits into a bucket. She wipes her lips, thinking to herself that even though the guy was suspicious, he didn't deserve such a fate. He was only 20 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. The main character sinks into deep thought. So, was the guy executed because of what she said? But what if it was all just a misunderstanding? Was this guy even dangerous? Of course, it wasn't Frim who executed him, but what if she overreacted? It was rash. The main character comes to the realization that everything in this world is beyond her understanding. There's a sign on the floor warning of wet cleaning. A voice calling her reaches Frim's ears through the haze. Startled, the girl breaks away from what she's doing and looks up. Varsal is standing next to her. He points to the approaching people and tells the main character to stop cleaning for now. Frim, mop in hand, sits down on the floor, burying her head in her knees. As she passes the girl, the young lady glances at her. Varsal announces that everyone has passed by. Frim has been sitting there with her head down the whole time. Varsal advises the girl to be more careful, since that suspicious guy was caught, but we can't rule out the possibility that there's someone else. The main character reluctantly agrees. Varsal glances at Frim. He informs her that the head chef has called for her. He wants the main character to help him clean the kitchen again. Frim recalls that his name is Sir Rolai. Varsal apologizes for giving the girl so many tasks. He says he asked his superiors not to overload her with work. Frim asks the nobleman not to worry, since the chores help distract her from her thoughts. Varsal doesn't argue. Back in the kitchen, Rolai apologizes to Frim for making her do the cleaning. He says he would have done it all himself if it weren't for his bad back. The main character replies that everything is fine and thanks him for the meal. Many find Rolai strange, since he loves to cook even though the head chef is an aristocrat. After he and Frim clean up the dirty floors on which the man had slipped, Rolai cooks his signature dish, steaks. The main character starts eating. The chef asks if the dish is tasty. Upon receiving an affirmative answer, he is delighted. Rolai notices Frim's strange look. She asks if everything is okay. The main character shakes her head hurriedly, explaining that she's just curious about the ingredients, since she doesn't recognize many of them. It seems to her that the grocery basket contains some huge leaves, dark brown carrots, and a strange, butchered animal resembling a rhinoceros. Rolai says in surprise that these are the most ordinary ingredients. Frim looks sad. The chef gently calls out to her, noticing how sad the main character looks, and suggests that the girl try her hand at cooking. She squeals with surprise. and he timidly asks, "Is it really okay?" Rolai smiles and confirms her permission. The man adds that since he's the only one in the kitchen, he's the one responsible for the main character. The chef remarks that cooking is fun. Frim happily says she'd love to use his kitchen. Rolai tells her she can take whatever she wants. Meanwhile, he's going to lie down for a bit. Frim remains alone in the kitchen. She wonders what she should make. After all, she knows how to cook most dishes. The main character thinks that Rolai is a bit strange after all. It's unwise to leave a small child unsupervised with knives and fire. Frim decides she's annoyed the chef a little. The girl stands with her hands on her hips, thoughtfully examining the kitchen utensils. Finally, she decides to just make something. Frim examines the bread, concludes that it's ordinary, and chooses it as a base. The main character decides to make a sandwich. First, she washes the greens thoroughly and tears them into small pieces. The leaves have a fairly neutral taste and excellent texture. Then Frim slices the cheese and the pre-cooked meat. The meat is simply excellent. The cheese, however, seems softer to the protagonist than what she's used to. Frim realizes that if she leaves everything as is, the flavors of the ingredients will be too strong, so she decides to make a sauce. At the very least, she'll get by with just salt. However, the seasoning confuses the girl a bit. It's rock salt and quite coarse at that. Frim ponders what else to add, and then her gaze falls on the table. To her delight, the main character discovers eggs and vinegar. Frim takes out a bowl and places it on the table. She cracks an egg into it, adds salt and vinegar. The protagonist pours oil into the mixture and stirs it. Frim summons water and uses it as a mixer. The girl happily notes that cooking this way is much easier. She scoops up a little sauce and tastes it. The main character has made excellent mayonnaise. Frim had always wanted to try making this after her factory tour. The main character spent a long time adjusting the flavor of her mayonnaise and ended up making a very large batch. Just then, Rolai walks into the kitchen and remarks that Frim has made something unusual. The girl asks how his back is. The chef cheerfully replies that it's only holding up thanks to the main character, and asks what dish the girl has prepared. She tells him it's mayonnaise and explains that it's a condiment. Gasping, Frim warns that the sauce isn't ready to eat yet. It needs to sit for a couple of days. She asks which ingredients can be used raw. However, Rolai doesn't listen to the main character. He dips his finger into the mayonnaise, and he licks it, ignoring Frim's warnings. After a moment, the chef reports in shock that the taste is incredible. He tries to guess the ingredients, identifying the vinegar and the egg. Waving her arms, the main character advises him to spit out the sauce immediately. Rolai asks if it's necessary to eat it with something. Frim explains that mayonnaise is usually used to dress vegetables, bread, or meat. The chef nods and takes a sandwich from Frim, taking a bite. Rolai's eyes widen. Tears well up in his eyes as a bewildered Frim notices. With a trembling voice, the head chef says it's delicious, very tender, and rich. The sandwich has a pleasant tang, and all the ingredients blend perfectly. Rolai delivers his verdict. It's not just a dish, it's a dream. The main character thanks the man. He says that everyone is sure to love the sandwiches. Rolai asks for the recipe, if it's not a secret, of course. Frim promises to teach him. This pleases the chef. Glancing at the main character, Rolai asks if her mood has improved. The girl's eyes widen. She nods sadly and thanks the chef. Frim walks past the columns. The sun is already setting. The main character is surprised at how quickly time has flown, because tomorrow she's already returning to Dogger. She wonders what she's going to do with all these gifts. Her thoughts are interrupted by someone's desperate cries. Someone is loudly begging for forgiveness. Varsal runs toward Frim, pleading with a certain Craig to let him go. A boy has grabbed the nobleman by the belt, begging to be led into at least the western corridor. A panicked Varsal brushes him off. Craig continues to beg him, bursting into tears. Frim approaches the pair and timidly says that although he doesn't know what's going on, he doesn't mind some extra work. Varsal refuses, but then Craig interrupts the conversation. He passionately declares that the prestige of the entire country is at stake, since the passage is located right in front of the Order of the Red Dragon. The boy, smiling slightly, gives a sly glance at Forbrin, who has approached, asking him to confirm his words. The guard admits that this news is indeed troubling. Forbrin asks Varsal if there's anything that can be done. Varsal says irritably to Craig that it's underhanded to report this to the guard. Sighing, Varsal asks Frim to stay for one more day. She replies that she must obey him, but asks if this is the right decision. Reminding him of the boss, Varsal scratches the back of his head, admitting that he feels Dogger will scold him. So Frim's assignment was extended. Rumors are circulating that local troops, mostly from the Order of the Red Dragon, have been pulled to the palace. The entire royal castle is being cleaned, but the area with the passageway remains dirty. Misunderstandings could arise due to a lack of budget or a dismissive attitude toward the order. The decision to clean up this area can be considered a political precaution. Frim smooths out the sheets as she climbs into bed. Since Varsal said so, there's nothing to be done. Although the heroine would like to see everyone at the Dogger house as soon as possible. As she closes her eyes, Frim decides that a one-day delay isn't such a big deal. With these thoughts, the girl falls asleep. Startled, the main character throws her eyes open. It seems to her that there's someone in the room, maybe even more than one. Cursing under her breath, the girl thinks she should move faster. A pale face appears in the darkness. Lying on her side with her eyes open, Frim gasps, realizing it was all just a dream. An elderly man with a broad smile declares that this is love. His fair-haired companion asks him not to talk nonsense, since this little girl has simply piqued the boy's interest. The old man, however, pays no heed to the objections, rejoicing that His Majesty has finally grown up and is now learning about matters of the heart. The young man sighs, noting that the old man isn't listening to him at all. He explains that he met the girl while disguised using magic. Yet he still feels uneasy. What if Frim turns out to be an enemy? The old man suggests that it is some kind of spiritual intuition and advises him to simply ask the heroine herself. The young king grunts thoughtfully. The young man places his hand on his head and asks Rura to show him his memories. He closes his eyes. The young man sees a room. A pregnant woman sits on a chair, her hands resting on her belly, and a man stands behind her. The young man realizes with confusion that this is the day that came immediately after he made a pact with the spirit. He also recognizes the couple in the room. They had been guarding the young ruler since childhood. The couple possessed magic and were like older siblings to the king. He cherished them deeply. When he was a child, the couple often took the future ruler to play with them. The king wonders why he had completely forgotten about this. One day, the girl was poisoned. She asked the young ruler for the spirit's blessing for her child. But it's not that simple. Unlike the bond between a human and a spirit, the magic of a blessing is unpredictable, and it's impossible to guess what might happen. Besides, the king's spirit is darkness. At the time, the ruler was deeply troubled. The king immediately warned that he was not ready to take on such a responsibility. However, the couple replied that it didn't matter. As parents, they were willing to do anything for their child. They had one more request for the ruler. The couple wanted the king to name their child. The young ruler's eyes widened. Now he remembered that child. Of course, the king had heard that families possessing water magic had suffered from disasters. However, the girl had a different name. Was that child even alive? Could Frim be that girl? The old man notices that the king seems to have found the answer to his question. The king nods, and with a smile, he says that the next time they meet, the old man will be surprised. The king is sleeping in his bed. A dark figure looms over the sleeping young man. The stranger raises a knife, aiming for the young ruler's throat. At that very moment, the king opens his eyes wide, and he jumps up abruptly, pushing the figure away. Darkness swirls around the young ruler's hand. He realizes that an assassin has entered his room. If Rura hadn't woken the king, he would already be dead. The ruler raises his hand. Darkness covers the eyes of the would-be assassin. The man says in a trembling voice that he can't see anything. The king shouts that there are intruders in the castle. Suddenly, the shaken ruler senses something. He realizes he has been poisoned. But suddenly the door bursts open. A sword-wielding maid rushes into the room, cursing the previous intruder and demanding that he kill the king as soon as possible. The ruler himself turns around, still pondering the alleged assassin. The young man notes that he looks like a nobleman and assumes that the assassin did this using magic. Grabbing a vase from the table, the king hurls it at the maid with all his might. She slices the object in two with a swing of her sword. Shards mixed with water scatter throughout the room. Seizing the moment, the young ruler swiftly slides into a secret hatch. Above his head, he hears the shouts of the guards, who have heard the commotion in the royal chambers. The maid, noticing that the young man has disappeared, demands that they find him quickly. The young king, gasping for breath, stumbles down the passageway, leaning his hand against the stone wall. The young man hastily pulls his hand away from his mouth, and he vomits at his feet. Wiping his lips, the king continues down the corridor. He wonders, could his uncle really be so desperate for the crown? The struggle for the throne has brought the country much misery. The young king's father has fallen ill, and his uncle has gone mad. The nobles are greedily striving for power, and the country's neighbors are meddling in its affairs. Even dragons and spirits have become entangled in all this chaos, further exacerbating an already difficult situation. Everyone has become miserable. Even now, the young man, smiling nervously, admits to himself that he still doesn't understand why he became king. Lifting his head, he calls out to Rura, asking her to tell him what his spirit is. However, the young man doubts she will answer. Continuing on his way, the young ruler thinks that the country's development has always gone hand in hand with spirits, and even now that hasn't changed. Being king is always, first and foremost, a title, while personality and magical power play no significant role. The most important thing is to come from the ruling family and receive a special blessing. The king is the only person entrusted with uniting spirits and people, thereby fulfilling a significant role. That day came suddenly, the day the current king's father fell. The boy is flung aside, crashing to the floor. The door closes, and the young man grabs the bars, calling out to his brother. He asks why he ended up in this place. The other orders the boy, calling him Chartres, to stay behind the bars, and adds that he has no business getting involved in arguments. The young man, clinging to the bars, shouts that this is madness. Chartres can't understand what kind of quarrel could possibly exist between brothers, given that they've always gotten along so well. However, his companion isn't listening. Chartres' brother says they'll look after the boy and tells him not to worry about food. The man prepares to leave and adds that the situation will soon settle down. Turning back, he promises that Chartres will surely understand everything someday. Clinging to the bars, the young man begs his brother not to leave, but his brother does not listen to him, and a desperate cry escapes Chartres' lips. As the young king makes his way down the dark corridor, memories of that day wash over him. In that prison, Chartres was completely alone, and in the end, he ascended to the throne against his will. Then he found himself drawn into a power struggle. In his heart, the young ruler curses all these quarrels between factions and declares that he hates both the spirits and the brothers who lost their lives because of this nonsense. Gritting his teeth in despair, Chartres admits that he didn't want to become king in the slightest. With his mind clouded, the young man realizes that the poison seems to have begun to take effect. Chartres mentally addresses his uncle, wearily noting that the man could not have come up with anything better than such a covert attack. The exhausted young man's head is splitting with pain, and he feels nauseous. Chartres realizes he'll be out of breath soon and decides he needs to get out of here as fast as possible. The boy recalls that the exit must be somewhere very close by, literally a couple of meters away from him. Gathering his strength, Chartres lifts the hatch on the tunnel ceiling. The young man crawls through it and looks around, holding the cover in place. After looking around, Chartres realizes he's in a storage shed for cleaning supplies. The boy decides to get out of this room first and foremost, leaning wearily against the walls. Chartres makes his way to the door and flings it open. To the young ruler's astonishment, someone is already waiting for him outside. A stranger, summoning fire in the palm of his hand, declares that he will take Chartres' life. The young king, like a rag doll, flies back into the guardhouse, clutching his head with his hands. He presses his back against the door, which shakes from the blows. Outside, the stranger is already calling out to his accomplices, telling them that Chartres is hiding in the hut. The young ruler realizes that he cannot go out into the street, which means he will have to return to the tunnel. However, the shouts are getting closer. Clicking his tongue, Chartres realizes they've almost caught up to him. With no other choice, the young man decides to hide. Chartres crams himself into the farthest corner, cloaking himself in his dark magic. The boy stumbles right into Frim, who is lying in bed. Seeing the face sticking out of the cloud, the heroine screams piercingly, clutching the blanket. Chartres grimaces upon recognizing the girl. Just then, his pursuer bursts into the room. Raising his blade, he asks in confusion if the young man is really here. The stranger never gets an answer. With a powerful wave of his hand, Chartres uses magic to slice through the pursuer's neck. Blood spatters from the stranger's throat, and he slumps to the floor with a wheeze. A maid rushes into the barn, calling for Batty and wondering where her servant has gone. Chartres emerges from the darkness beside her and lunges at the bewildered woman. Breathing heavily, he pushes the maid aside, and he himself slumps exhausted to the floor. Chartres, breathing hoarsely, leans against the wall. The maid's bloody body lies next to him. Shouts can be heard. People decide this is no place for them. Chartres realizes with weariness that he is about to lose consciousness. Frim sees the young man's head droop limply onto his chest. Squinting suspiciously, the main character finally decides that this isn't a dream after all. Sitting up abruptly in bed, the girl decides that the guy is a ghost. Chartres clears her throat. The main character flinches in surprise. The young man asks grimly, "Are you Frim?" She nods. Then, leaning closer and apologizing, she timidly asks if her unexpected visitor hates her. The girl calls him Mr. Head. Chartres grimly decides that Frim hasn't fully woken up yet. He asks exactly where in the palace they are. The main character sits down next to him and replies that she doesn't know herself. The girl explains that she just works at the castle and asks what happened to the guy. Chartres replies briefly that it's the effect of poison and asks anxiously if they'll find him here. Frem passionately assures him that no one ever comes into this room. Then she realizes what the young man meant about the poison, and the girl decides to examine Chartres' wounds while giving him some water to drink. He gratefully accepts the glass. The heroine knows that the first priority is to stop the bleeding. Frem is glad she brought her dagger with her, for which she mentally thanks Varsal. The girl cuts off a piece of cloth and begins to examine her patient. Frem realizes that the wound is serious. The girl shoves the prepared cloth into Chartres' mouth, warning him that it will hurt and advising him to bite down on the fabric. The boy just mumbles something indistinctly. Frem's lips tremble, and she slaps her cheeks hard to pull herself together. The girl realizes that if she wants to save the young man, she must act immediately. Of course, the heroine has no idea what is going on, but she knows one thing for sure. Only she can save the boy's life. Frem raises her hands decisively and commands the magic to wash the wounds. Chartres hisses in pain. Noticing the young man's condition, the heroine begs him to bear with it and hurriedly explains that she is washing the poison out of the wound. Frem recalls how, long ago, she was injured by a rusty nail. She went to the hospital, where they washed the wound very thoroughly and for a long time. Finishing the procedure, the main character orders Chartres to press down on the wound as hard as possible, while she herself warns that she's going to call for help. Frem walks away, feeling the wounded man's gaze on her back. As she walks away, the main character wonders if she should even help a stranger. The girl remembers that, according to rumors, the young man was supposed to be executed. It's quite possible that he's a criminal who escaped his sentence. Frem even considers abandoning the young man. However, the main character immediately dismisses these thoughts, deciding that she will not do that under any circumstances. The girl throws open the door and freezes with a scream, not understanding what is happening. Frem finds herself right in the middle of a burning clearing. She doesn't even notice the flames at first, but she immediately feels the heat radiating from them. The man standing in front of the door snorts in surprise when he sees the child. He asks what happened to the boy who went into the guardhouse. The main character, flustered, asks him to repeat himself and replies that this is clearly not the most important thing right now. She hastily summons her magic and directs water at the fire. Glancing over her shoulder, Frem asks if the stranger is referring to the young man from the palace. Apologizing, she asks him to help her put out the fire. However, the main character doesn't have time to finish speaking. The flames rush right over her, and the girl screams. The fire goes out. The hooded man asks who Frem is. Is she the cleaning lady, or just a common servant to an aristocrat? The stranger orders the girl through gritted teeth to get out of here, and fast. The main character sees a fiery whip in the man's hand. Frem realizes that the stranger set the hut on fire, and assumes he was aiming for the wounded man inside the guardhouse. The girl asks sternly what the man wants from the young man. He loudly orders the main character not to meddle in matters that don't concern her. His fist is engulfed in flames. With a shout, the man lunges at Frem, firing at her. The girl doesn't panic and, in turn, summons a jet of water. The two spells collide. A sudden downpour begins to beat down on the ground. The man declares irritably that he has no idea who Frem is, but advises her to hand over the wounded young man safe and sound, and then he won't harm her. The heroine remains silent. Frem doesn't understand what kind of person he is. The girl realizes that even if she hands the young man over to the stranger, it doesn't guarantee that she'll be spared. The heroine remembers the whip and is finally convinced that the man was going to kill her. Lowering his head, he orders Frem once again to leave immediately. No sooner does he release the fire than his face is drenched with water. Not understanding what is happening, the man loses his balance and falls onto the cobblestones. The main character sees the fire and rushes to put it out. She hopes the man isn't dead. Of course, she had no choice since the stranger was about to kill her, but the girl isn't sure if the concept of self-defense even exists in this world. But at that moment, something pushes Frem in the back, and the main character, in turn, falls face first to the ground. She realizes that the stranger is alive. The man slowly realizes that he hadn't planned to kill the child. He lets out a scream and shoots a jet of flame. A jet of fire flies toward Frem. The girl raises her hand. Her greatest fear is that she simply won't have time to activate her magic. Hissing through her teeth, the main character summons her magic with great difficulty, and she orders the man to back off. A jet of water hits the stunned stranger. It drenches him, and the man collapses to the ground. Frem, breathing heavily, sits down. Across from her, her opponent gets to his feet. They both gasp for air, trying to catch their breath. Finally, the man asks who the heroine is. The respite is over. To his feet and demands that she hand over the wounded man peacefully. Exhausted, Frim raises her hand with her last ounce of strength and releases a burst of magic. The man, in turn, summons fire, which envelopes his palm. He asks why the heroine is clinging so tightly to the young man. The stranger adds that because of this foolish king, the country has lost far too much. Frim freezes, stunned by what she has heard. She had no idea that the wounded young man was the king. The stranger continues irritably, saying that the ruler dares to claim he doesn't need the throne. He asks if the heroine knows how many people have died. The man adds that in the noble house alone that practices water magic, which Frim uses so actively, dozens have died. The stranger asks furiously, why on earth is the heroine helping the king? Her expression darkens. The girl quietly admits that she doesn't know exactly what the ruler has done. In response, the man demands that she hand over the king. He shouts that such a notorious scoundrel has no place among the living. Frim shields the guardhouse where the wounded king is located. The stranger speaks so lightly. However, no matter who the ruler is, the heroine has already firmly decided that she will help him in any way she can. The girl asks how she can live peacefully from now on if she abandons this man now, even if he is a criminal or a king. Frim sadly reflects that she has already turned away from far too much in this world. Every time she turned a blind eye to something, the main character convinced herself that it was all for her own good and safety. However, it all built up and continued to wound the girl's heart. Pounding her fist against her chest, Frim passionately declares that even a person guilty of crimes must go on living and face justice. She shouts that she no longer wishes to regret her decisions and actions. The main character couldn't even enjoy delicious food. A lump of guilt would form in her throat. When that suspicious guy was executed, the girl began to be tormented by pangs of conscience. But Frim didn't even know him. Perhaps this young king really is a true villain. Perhaps he truly deserves to die. However, the heroine cannot simply stand by and watch as the ruler is killed. That would be wrong. If Frim had done that, she would have regretted it for the rest of her life. Straightening up resolutely, the heroine declares that no matter who the wounded boy is, she will never abandon him. Frim shouts these final words at the top of her lungs. The stranger sighs heavily at her speech. He notes that the heroine is still so young, yet already incredibly feisty. The man says bitterly that he himself had a daughter. He admits that he doesn't want to hurt people like Frim. However, the stranger adds that he has a duty to fulfill. The man asks for forgiveness and releases a whip of flame from his hand, declaring that the heroine will die right here. Fire magic floods the ground, heading toward the girl. In response, Frim releases a powerful jet of water. The two spells collide. The heroine struggles to hold back the water magic. The girl realizes that her opponent's fiery whip can be stopped by a barrier, but the shield won't absorb the blow completely. Frim is already too exhausted. The man shouts, demanding that the heroine surrender and retreat. Stumbling from exhaustion, she replies that she will not stop under any circumstances. The girl feels her magic dwindling with every passing second. She realizes she can't hold on any longer. The stream of water vanishes. For a moment, Frim watches the fiery whip as it slashes into the girl's chest. The heroine is flung aside and falls to the ground. A maniacal smile appears on the stranger's face as he realizes he has won. However, the man's joy is short-lived. Frim rises, declaring that it is too early for him to celebrate. A stream of water sweeps the stunned stranger off his feet. He asks incredulously, did the girl really just carry the liquid over the ground? The man doesn't get to finish his sentence. He falls to the ground, and Frim directs her magic at him. The stranger doesn't understand. When did the heroine manage to pull all this off? But then a powerful jet of water engulfs him. The man cries out, and the current sweeps him away. Breathing heavily, Frim decides that this should work. However, at that moment, a shout rings out from somewhere. Someone asks why the man is bothering with such a little girl. The heroine sees that several more people, hidden by cloaks and hoods, are standing over the stranger, who is soaked to the skin. Her opponent reports that the king was here. His companion replies briefly that the matter has already been settled. Gasping, the defeated man warns his accomplices not to let their guard down. Frim may be small, but she possesses incredible water powers. The heroine realizes with a sense of loss that there are now more assassins. The situation couldn't be any worse now. The girl's solitary figure stands out in the clearing. Her enemies tower over her. Frim stares intently at her enemies. She clenches her fists. The heroine senses that things are bad. Her magic is almost gone. The girl can't run away either. She simply has no strength left. If this continues, it won't end well. From behind Frim comes the tapping of a cane and the sound of footsteps. Someone says that this is enough. The main character listens, bewildered. Behind the surprised girl stands the king, leaning on his staff. Fixing his gaze on the enemies, the ruler orders Frim to hand him over. The heroine turns around, her eyes widening in astonishment. She's a loss for words. She sees the pale boy clenching his teeth tightly and frowning resolutely. The girl's gaze falls on the bandage on his leg. Noticing how heavily the young man is leaning on what looks like a cane, Frim realizes that the king manages to hold himself up even in this condition. The hooded attacker, gazing at the weary couple, remarks sarcastically that the root of evil has finally come to light. He asks why exactly the young man became king, and not his outstanding brothers. The man shouts that the boy will die for their homeland. His comrades loudly join him, supporting his words. Frim, leaning his hands on the cobblestones, demands that the attackers stay away from them. The girl unleashes another burst of water magic. For now, there is still a considerable distance between the opponents. The king turns to the heroine and stops her. He notes that Frim must not die. The ruler smiles kindly, adding that the girl has already done a tremendous job. The heroine grows somber and looks away. The king has decided to die right here. He knows he will be killed, but he still tries to save Frim, even at the cost of his own life. Their enemies are tired of waiting. One of them advises the main character not to be stubborn and to hand the king over to them now. The enemy even promises that if the girl does as she's told and leaves right now, they'll let her live. Frim presses her palm gently against the ground. The water obediently ripples beneath its mistress's hands. Shouting the command, the heroine unleashes a volley of magical droplets. The king stares at her in shock. The enemies click their tongues in displeasure, cursing the girl. They assume more stable stances and grip their weapons tighter. The king stands there in silence, his gaze fixed straight ahead. Frim is breathing heavily. Snapping out of his stupor, the ruler shouts for the heroine not to worry about him. The girl notices that the boy has gone pale and demands that he not even speak such nonsense. Frim adds that he cannot abandon the king. The heroine clenches her teeth, unleashing new water blasts. She reflects that if she didn't have magic and knowledge, she would surely have asked someone else for help. At the same time, Frim will be trying her hardest to convince herself that she's doing the right thing. The ruler asks briefly, why is the girl sacrificing herself for him? She freezes, lost in her memories. Back then, in the protagonist's home world, a ball had flown into a child on the escalator. Frim regrets not helping the little one. Perhaps she should have even given her life for him, or maybe it would have been enough to simply reach out her hand. The protagonist wonders, why do people save others at all? For so many years, she has avoided giving her answer to such an obvious question. The girl tosses her head back, thinking contemptuously that it's terrible hypocrisy, some kind of pathetic, petty self-satisfaction. The main character understands one thing. Only she herself can decide what she is willing to do to save a person suffering right before her eyes. Frim shouts that she doesn't need any reason to help another. The girl is ready to do everything in her power, especially since she possesses both magic and knowledge. Turning to the ruler, the main character apologizes, and she asks for permission to resist a little longer. At first, the king looks at Frim in astonishment. Then he smiles gently. Nodding, he says he grants her permission, adding that if nothing is done, then life is already doomed to death. The heroine orders the young ruler to lean against her, hold on tight, and not move. He nods, briefly replying that he understands. One of the enemies asks impatiently, "What are you doing?" and unleashes a fiery whip. The king stays close to Frim, and the girl covers them with a dome of water. She advises the ruler to brace for the blow. He starts to ask again, but doesn't get the chance to finish. The two spells collide. En explosion roi. The shockwave is so powerful that it bends the trees. The king and Frim, still clinging to each other, are swept aside. Palace servants rush to the epicenter of the explosion. One of them remarks on the incredible roar. The king stands near Frim, who is lying on the ground. The people who have rushed over shout that there are wounded at the sight of the explosion. Someone joyfully announces that the ruler has been found and urges everyone to go to him. The first thing that catches Frim's eye are two boxes containing remote controls. The girl realizes she's standing in the middle of the kitchen. Next to her is a dining table with someone already sitting at it. Another person is walking through the kitchen. Everyone is busy with their own thing. Someone is eating. Someone is on their phone. The main character notices that the table and the people are at the bottom of the ocean, with fish swimming around them. Neither the people nor the fish see anything unusual in what is happening. Frim realizes that it's all just a dream. But then she catches the eye of the woman across from her. The woman smiles warmly at the girl. The main character recognizes her mother and calls out to her. With a muffled sound, Frim wakes up blinking widely and clutching the edge of the blanket with her hand. The girl tries to move, but lets out a pain groan. Glancing at the bandage on her face, the main character realizes that her wounds have been dressed. A maid is standing next to Frim's bed and notices that the main character has woken up. The maid promises to call someone right away, and she leaves the room. The girl sits up in bed and smiles wearily, admitting to herself that she overdid it during the battle. When her magic was almost completely depleted, Frim used her last trump card. She cast several water barriers over herself and the king. The protagonist infused the outer layer with oxygen and hydrogen. The girl wanted to cause an explosion to attract people's attention or at least scare off her enemies. As Frim had expected, her opponent used a fire whip. Looking at her bandaged palm, the heroine realizes that the explosion turned out to be much stronger than she had anticipated. The girl thinks she'll have a long recovery ahead of her with wounds like these. Just then, the door to the room bursts open, and the king rushes in, gasping for breath from running so fast. Behind him, a crowd of palace servants is milling about. Frim turns to face the newcomer, and only now does she notice the vase of flowers on the windowsill. The girl hesitates, not knowing what to say to the king. He thanks the heroine for saving his life. In response, Frim silently falls face down onto the bed. The king asks in puzzlement, "What are you doing?" The girl apologizes, explaining that she cannot bow any other way because her legs hurt. The king sighs, saying that he forgives Frim for any impertinence, and asks her to relax. She sits back down. The maid helps her. Hesitating, the heroine says she heard that the ruler had been executed. He replies sheepishly that there has been some misunderstanding. He adds that it is his own fault, since he was impersonating someone else. The maid asks in bewilderment, "What are you talking about?" He, feeling embarrassed, suggests changing the subject. Frim asks who this young man really is and where he's from. She asks if her companion is really the true king. He doesn't know what to say. He pauses to think, and finally announces that he is the main character's father. Everyone present, including Frim, asks in unison, stunned. One of the palace servants asks incredulously, "Could the ruler really have an illegitimate child?" A maid covers her face, flushed with embarrassment. The king hastily replies that this is not the case, and that he is more like an elder brother. He abruptly falls silent, realizing that things have not improved. Clearing his throat, the ruler introduces himself. His full name is Chartra Wainoa Liarana Oberos. The young man adds that he is indeed the king of this country, and that Frim truly saved his life. Chartra explains that he used to have a bodyguard with whom he got along very well. The bodyguard and his wife had a child. Chartra gave the child protection and a name. The king adds that he is Frim's godfather. She looks up at him in surprise. The maid and the servant listen to the ruler in amazement. With a nervous laugh, the heroine asks if Chartra is sure he hasn't mixed anything up. He confidently replies that he has checked everything and adds that even the hair color confirms it. Frim asks, "What is her name then?" Chartra replies that the girl's real name is Fremis Tananorem Lucarim. The stunned servant asks again in disbelief, rushing over to the king. The main character doesn't understand his reaction and asks, "Is that really so bad?" She adds that she just wants to get back to her old job as soon as possible. The maid remarks that the girl's wish is unlikely to come true. Chartra agrees with her, saying that even if Frim returns, it's by no means certain she'll be able to live as she did before. The main character asks what he means. She asks if it has to do with her background. The king and the maid exchange glances, and Chartra nods to the girl. She explains that Frim's birth family, the Lucarims, plays a major role. Chartra adds that they are an influential family of the water nobility who currently support his uncle. More specifically, Prince Rayarm, the older brother of the former king. Frim already understands where the young man is going with this, but asks for clarification anyway. Chartra confirms the girl's guess. The Lucarim family is under the control of the people who sent assassins after him. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.